I have been looking forward to this one. And Ben, I know you have too, but at the risk of sounding hyperbolic, which I will do occasionally on this podcast, Led Zeppelin III is an album that probably means as much to me as any. So I know it's a bit of... we're setting up landmines here because we're early on in this podcast history, and already we're saying we're going to do Led Zeppelin, and then their first 5-6 albums are all classics. We're going to hit the ground running with something that we both probably like a lot more than we don't. So it might sound like we're waxing their balls a little bit here, but I am especially excited for this one, Ben, because I want to give an album like this its flowers in a way that I think the critical mass has done in the last decade or so, but certainly did not do when it came out. And it's cool to see that, man, maybe my early intuitions as a young music listener were spot on. In other words, I'm not going to say that I was ahead of the curve, Ben. I'm not going to do that, but I can say as an 8-year-old buying the cassette from Target and listening to the thing in full, only knowing Immigrant Song, really, I knew even then, I like this, and there's something different about it. So you journeyed into this album this week. What was your previous experience or knowledge beforehand?
Well, we will get to that for sure. You sort of took it out of the wind out of my sails there in terms of my thoughts exactly, which I love. The consistency that I've had journeying through Zeppelin so far has been consistent in the way that there are songs that I know were not the heavy hitters on these Zeppelin albums, and we'll get to this as we do the track-by-track run-through kind of perspective of where we were, what we did, what was going on in that moment that I think will ring true to what we're going to get to. But overall essence is just the fact that, yeah, man, like first thing I do after we finish a pod is wake up the next day, go grab my coffee, throw on the next album, right? And I let it ride as long as I can before I have a meeting or have something else I need to do. This one specifically, I decided, hey, I'm going to get out there and mow the lawn on the second listen and the second pass through. So, again, there were tracks that I hadn't visited in so long, and they're not singles. They're not, the ones that you would have expected, where I have these core memories and I'm just like jogging my memory on things that I haven't thought about in 25 years or further back that really hit home with me. And I realized, my dad probably started me on Zeppelin 3 or 4, just knowing some of what's about to come in terms of storytelling on these track breakdowns. We obviously have some pretty tight-knit feelings towards a few songs on this album too. But I was very excited when I just scratched the surface because I realized, okay, now we're into it, and I think we'll get to this, the whole third album thing, right? We've talked about that. Other bands have had tons of success, not success, right? When it comes to that third album time frame. So looking forward to that conversation. But really, man, my first takeaway was just like smiles. And like you said, man, I hate the fact almost that we are just massaging the essence that is Led Zeppelin so hard through 1, 2, and 3, but it's so difficult not to, and it's so difficult not to for this album specifically, because unlike 1 and 2, 1, zero anticipation. They were brand new. Maybe some people knew, right, that Jimmy was doing a side project or something post Yardbirds. 2, pressure was on. They delivered. 3, you're thinking, what is next? Where could they go here? And I think they took a leap of faith. And, man, I mean, again, just listening to it through and through and how they decided to encapsulate side A and B and the whole nine just really put it there for me. So I'm looking forward to this episode. It's a nice stormy evening here in Louisville, Kentucky, and it just seems all too fitting that I can hear subtle rumblings of slow thunder in the background. No joke, just heard it. So I think the setting is perfect, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I got the incense brewing. Yeah, I'm trying to set the mood, which this album, they went for it. There's no doubt about it. We're going to get into the track-by-track breakdown, the recording process. We'll get into our awards and categories. You mentioned the third album thing, which there seems to be two tracks that famous rock bands go by, and one is the debut album that just explodes on the scene, and then the rest of their careers, they're kind of playing catch-up. I'll give you some random examples of that. Van Halen, while they did have 1984's massive success, they had a huge hit with their debut album. They rode that for the next 6 years when David Lee Roth was there, and that set the template for the band, and they never really strayed from that too far. You can look at Guns N' Roses. It was almost too big, Appetite for Destruction, and they were never able to quite capture that brilliance on any other studio work that they had. Use Your Illusion was kind of a mess, a sprawling mess, and then you didn't get Chinese Democracy for like 56 years after that. Now, the third album, though, you mentioned this, and for Zeppelin, it wasn't make or break because they were already there. But I think that gave them the cachet to try some new stuff here. There is a history in rock, though, with Bruce Springsteen. He needed Born to Run to hit. It did. You look at U2. They needed War to hit. Sunday Bloody Sunday, New Year's Day, because October, their second album, a bust. There are other bands where that third album leaps them into a new stratosphere. So Smashing Pumpkins, they had Gish. Siamese Dream was a big radio album. Melancholy was a double LP set that was massive, worldwide famous now. With Zeppelin, the cool thing about 3 is now we appreciate it as a classic among their best. At the time, it was just different enough to throw enough people that it's not like their popularity waned, but I think that it made Led Zeppelin IV essentially, we need to distill all these elements into the perfect album. They did that with 4, but I will say this, Ben. I don't know if Led Zeppelin III is their best album. I do know it is my favorite, and I know it's the one I listen to the most. So I don't know if you, this early on in the series, can get on board with that big of a statement. I do want to put the proverbial gun to your head early, though. 1, 2, or 3.
Truly on the spot. Was not expecting that. Man, it's kind of crazy to think about doing that this early because each album to me is approached somewhat similar. These guys are not dumb by any standards. They kind of know how to put together 9 to 10 tracks, right? And this one, though, in terms of cosmic takeaways, moments in my life, thoughts, conjuring up memories that I haven't dug into in a long time, I would put 3 up there. I think 1 is just, man, it's like I said, I have never dabbled in some of the finer extracurriculars in life for clear reasons, because I know that I would go back day after day, much like one of the new birthday cake shakes that I hear of. You know, it's just if you taste it once, you're probably going to go back daily. 1 is the moment that it's like, okay, I'm done. Like I don't need any other influences. Is
this a weed reference here? The birthday cake? What is a birthday cake shake?
Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, just heard news of this this week.
Oh.
I don't usually listen to morning radio, but I was listening to Bob and Tom, and they were talking about this new birthday cake shake where they literally blend up birthday cake with just a little bit of vanilla ice cream and milk, and that's the product that you get. And they kind of start laughing, and one of the co-hosts said, I don't try that, just like I've never tried cocaine. And they're like, wait, you got to explain that to me. And he said, it's simply for the sole fact that I'm afraid I'm going to like it too much, and I'm going to have to explain to my wife why I'm going back every single day for this birthday cake shake. To me, Zeppelin, the moment I heard it, I know we talked about it during Zeppelin 1, but there was never is it the Who or Zeppelin for me? It was never, what's your poison? It's always been Zeppelin. And I'm not even a super fan like you. It's just, if it's on, if it's, something that somebody's playing for me, or do you want to play it yourself live, I'm all in. And 1 did that to me just because of some of the songs that I experienced on it. Now, 3, top to bottom, which, again, we'll get to throughout this this journey of episode 3. But I would say by the end of this duration here, I'll probably agree with you. And it would be hard not to argue the fact to the listeners to say that it's not the same, because this wholeheartedly, and I've got it noted here, I didn't want to get to it this early, but tracks in my rankings, 1 through 8 was literally the hardest rankings that I've experienced through this journey so far. Because, and what I mean by that is not this one is clearly even with this. It was that there were multiple instances where like 3 tracks could be fit into like number 4.
Yeah.
I was like, how can I put this at 5 and that at 4? They could all be 4s, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
1 and 2, man, were pretty clear cut. Like, it was easier for me to justify why a track was above another, right? Not that everybody's going to agree with me on that, but this one was like, I'm arguing with myself as I'm going down this list. And finally, I put something together that I was comfortable and happy with. But I guess that's a whole long-winded way of saying that I think 3 is probably my favorite as well amongst the first 3. But I'm also firm on the fact that 3 could not come without 2 and 2 could not come without 1.
I think 2 is the objective hard rock classic. I think 3 is something that when you dig deeper into the Zeppelin discography, it stands alone in a really cool way. I think it's often been talked about as a transition record into what you saw in Led Zeppelin 4. Bear in mind, Led Zeppelin 1 did have acoustic tracks with Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You and Black Mountainside. And you did have acoustic, come to think of it, on Your Time Is Gonna Come. Oddly enough, there is an acoustic guitar solo on Thank You on Led Zeppelin 2, and there's a lot of dynamics. I guess there's acoustic on Ramble On as well. But it was less so than the first. So this is a complete 180 for fans back in 1970. They get this from their local record shop. They put it on, and the first track, hey, whoa, Whole Lotta Love rocked. Immigrant Song is immediate. They did it again. And then track 2 is such a record scratch, 180. And the cool thing about this album, Ben, is that they had the chutzpah and they had the cachet through 2 albums to try something different. And I would argue that in terms of a full cohesive album, 1 through 8 or 1 through 10 in this case, Led Zeppelin 4 probably perfected this stew, this cosmic stew that they were brewing up. But I agree with you. There were 8 tracks that I had a hard time ranking. I kind of knew what 9 and 10 were, but nonetheless, I think when we get to those tracks, we can still make an argument, assuming that our 10 is probably the same, that it's so off-the-wall batshit that it's kind of a cool way to, well, for fear of spoiling things, wrap up a weird album. It's just such a mic drop back in 1970 that, we're this, highly sought-after rock band on Atlantic Records, and we could just give you riff rock. But here is something so strange and weird, and you might not even make it through the track. Yep. I love that they were already there just a year and a half into the band.
Agreed. And to add to that, I think one of the most fascinating things is that for the tracks that they went ahead and did that would have been similar to 1 and 2, bluesy, if you will, it's sort of in and of itself has a life of its own. Like, this is totally Zeppelin. This is no longer, a full-on representation of something they got that they knew they needed to add just because they sounded good doing it, right? Train is a coming, things like that, where it's like, this is Zeppelin. They're here. And in terms of that oddity, I also, they're wrapping up. This is clever. I think we probably agree on what is 10. But then there are tracks on this album that are like all timers, dude. Like ones where there are moments of movies and film, TV, where like, man, this album is all over the place in lore of history, where it wasn't just us feeling certain ways song by song, right? There's a reason that it's just spread out amongst pop culture as well. So looking forward to it. I realized something today too, man. You've got a leg up on me. You have a somewhat of a timer somewhere, given that we do these on Zoom, for listeners that don't know that, and you have a time clock on how long we've been at it. I just sort of let it roll, which I love, but I would assume right now that we're somewhere closing in on about 20 minutes. Yeah. And again, I haven't cheersed you.
Cheers, bro.
Nor have we officially started, but man, have we gotten into some stuff already. So this is how it goes.
Yeah, and I want to hit one thing too before we really get nitty gritty in this album. Led Zeppelin II sounds like a hard rock record from 1969 in the best way possible. This album, if you just listen to it sonically, would you necessarily place it in 1970? I think that there's some otherworldly quality to this album that sonically it is really clean. I mean, I'm trying to think of the grungiest songs, and the riffs like Out on the Tiles still have kind of a polish or a sheen that you didn't get on Led Zeppelin II. And that it's just more difficult to place the time in which it was recorded. So I think that sometimes, while Led Zeppelin II is timeless for its riffs and for the performances and really for laying this blueprint of what hard rock bands could do and in many people's eyes should do if they're a really good hard rock band, Led Zeppelin III didn't follow that template, for one. And two, you don't see, and I'm not picking on him, you don't see the Greta Van Fleets of the world saying, we want to be like Led Zeppelin from Led Zeppelin III. This is not shitting on them. It's simply saying that if you are inspired by Zeppelin, the hardest album I think to emulate is this one. I think this is the one that would be most difficult to say, I want 10 tracks like that.
100%. Yeah, if you were trying to go album for album. And it's funny you say that. Also, it's very difficult to do kind of these precursors to the full episode without mentioning some songs. But there is one note, and I'll reiterate it when we get to this track, but because you brought it up, just interesting new nuances to the way they approach his album. I had noted for myself the isolated Robert in Celebration Day, right? It's just his vocals, and then the whole band comes in, right, after the intro, which sort of Moog synth is from Friends, which, like, the exploration they took within this album, you can just tell that there was a little bit more thought-provoking approach to the way that they did everything. And that specifically, like when you're listening to it in your headphones, soundproof, like it's just you and Robert, you realize that, hey, this is definitely different because they're not traveling the whole time they're putting this album together and bootstrapping it to make sure that they hit a release date for what was Led Zeppelin II. Like you said, there's nothing, we're not taking away anything from it, but this was just, to me, a more thoughtful approach of how they wanted to really be remembered and really have things hit the stride of what they were. And I mean, it's a hot take in and of itself, because obviously they probably weren't calculating things as much as we would assume or argue at this point. But it's hard not to whenever you sonically go through this album and you're like, okay, so things were done differently, clearly. And love what's happening here. I love what I'm hearing. And it's just a breath of different air than 1 and 2 in such a drastic way, with still having hints of the same approach to how they formulate an album, right? And I know we get to it so often in 1 and 2, but I'm going to say it again. If you're spinning this album in your room and you go from track 1 to track 2, you are wholeheartedly wondering what the fuck is coming up next. And it's impossible not to think that, especially now after a carnal knowledge of Led Zeppelin 1 and Led Zeppelin 2, man. I mean, I can't imagine listening for the absolute first time with no real knowledge of much of anything else what's to come. It's really easy for us to do these deep dives because we know the longevity of their career and what's happening now. But sitting there, listening to that track by track, which we just did obviously this week, I could just tell the total cosmic differences of what I was listening to versus 1 and 2 and how thoughtfully it was put together and how much time they took on some of these tracks. So I think that with that said, man, let's dive deep.
Dive in, Dave Matthews style? Just kidding. No polar bears in this episode. Welcome to Drop the Needleheads with Schmiggy. That's me. And Yahtzee, that's him. Where the records spin, the bourbon flows, and the breakdowns, at least in this series, are deeper than John Bonham's bass drum. Speaking of this series, it is The Pod Remains the Cast. This is our 3rd episode. You will be hearing this sometime in the middle of June, which I think is appropriate, Ben, because out of all the Led Zeppelin albums, I most equate 3 and Houses of the Holy with summer. I wonder how much of that has to do with the cover art being bright, colorful, psychedelic in the case of Led Zeppelin III, and in the case of Houses of the Holy, neon almost. but this one is an album that I associate far more with warm weather. Kind of random. Is there a season of the year that you would associate this album with? Because I could see arguments for everything except probably winter. Fall? Is this a fall album for you?
Interesting question for me, because I always have those moments. Well, dude, I can't go any further. Track 2, I've got a great story. It's my own personal lore for those listening and wondering why we continue to use the word lore, folklore, for movies, music. It's just an easy way to pull out, some interesting facts about things that were happening during the time that may not just be regularly available. So track 2, I'll get to this, Mike, and I think that'll answer your question for where I put this album in terms of timing of the year. But I do agree. Bright and different approach to the album artwork. And Tangerine, right? There's just essences of this album that reek warm weather. So I'm with you on that. But I think my story that's coming up will influence some deeper thoughts on that. So
I dig that. All right, now, should we get into the background and recording of Led Zeppelin III?
Let's do it.
Let me dig up the notes. Now, the fun thing with this series, and partly why we did Zeppelin first, is because there's a bit of institutional knowledge. So when we get to later artists, we'll have to do more thorough research. Some of these are a mix of the cavalcade of books that I have about Zeppelin. Some of it are just doing some quick Wikipedia things, if we're being fully honest and transparent. That's okay. But before we go further, you noted something that I wanted to throw out for this episode. Bron-Y-Aur banter, I think, is a good moniker for Led Zeppelin III. Bron-Y-Aur is what, Ben? Do you remember what Bron-Y-Aur was all about?
Just from recent research and knowledge, I'm going to botch the name, but Bron-Y-Aur Cottage. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Where Robert and Jimmy decided to hole up and dive into writing this album. If that's probably the right way to put it. Maybe that's the clever way that they spun the reason that they were in a cottage in the middle of nowhere with no electricity. Perhaps it was an escape of what life became after Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. And hindsight is always 20/20. So maybe it was easy to excuse why they actually did it. But pretty fucking glad they did, right?
Zed's dead, baby. Zed's dead. Now, they go to Bron-Y-Aur, and this is on the tail end of a spring 1970 tour of America. Ended on April 18th in Phoenix, Arizona. They canceled the next gig, which is in Las Vegas the night after. They performed 28 shows in 30 days. I don't know how Robert Plant physically could do that, but he did. And the band was exhausted, understandably. So Page and Plant, Jimmy and Robert, head off to Bron-Y-Aur, which was a cottage in Wales where Robert and his family used to vacation when he was younger. And this relaxed setting, of course, informed a lot of the songwriting on this album. Now, it's not to say they didn't have bits and pieces already, but this is an album that was made in a pretty truncated time frame because we're already talking April, late April, they get to Bron-Y-Aur. And this album was released in October. It was in the can in August. So from songwriting through to recording and mixing, maybe 4 months in total. Now, one thing that both Jimmy and Robert have talked about in quotes is that they wanted to set out and show the general public that they could play any style they wanted to. Now, fans that really listened to Led Zeppelin 1 and 2, they knew that. The general public, though, had heard of Whole Lotta Love and maybe a couple other FM radio tracks that were all the heavier types. So there was this conception, understandably, that Led Zeppelin was a loud rock and roll band that just wanted to bash your head in with volume. And they really wanted to counter that. So that was what they set out to do. Not to mention at Bron-Y-Aur, Robert Plant talks about how it was him and Jimmy, and they each had a beautiful woman by their side, whether it was Robert's wife or his sister-in-law. And Jimmy, I think, was Charlotte Martin, with this beautiful French model. Yeah, so they were having a good time while they were there. This was vacation, but a productive one. And the fruits of it are basically all on this album, with a few things left over for later releases and one for a B-side, which we'll talk about too.
Amazing. Yeah. Just an insane way to come at this album versus how they approached 1 and 2. I just can't get over it. So Unreal.
Yeah, I mean, think about this, right? Led Zeppelin II, we talked about last episode how haphazard that whole thing was. They're touring America. They're going to any studio that they can get time in. This one is very much concentrated to songwriting in a cottage. Okay, John Paul, meet us here at Olympic Studios. Let's bash that out. But actually, before I get to Olympic Studios, which is where I think the bulk of this was recorded, armed with a bunch of songs, Zeppelin as a band retreats for the first time to Headley Grange. This is a place which will become much more important with Led Zeppelin IV, which was almost in its entirety recorded there. This is a mansion in East Hampshire. I don't know where that is. I think it's west of London. And we talked about last time, Ben, how my wife and I are going to Europe.
Yeah. Not
doing the countryside this time, but if we go, not if, but when we go again to London, I would certainly say, hey, let's go to, I don't know if they have Hertz over there, but let's go to Hertz or Enterprise, get us a little one of those things you drive on the right side, and we're going to go all the way to East Hampshire. I think Stonehenge is near there, actually, and see Headley Grange, which is where a lot of Zeppelin's classics were either written or recorded, and a few of them for this album as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to hear your takeaways from that trip, but I would be right there with you. I think the coolest thing, and, hopefully we'll get to this, honestly, it just kind of hit me in the head. Maybe we'll do a T-Rex mini-series here, but to be in like a little hatchback MG, convertible, rolling through the countryside of the UK in any capacity would be the way I would want to do it. I've been to enough cities, man. I think, you've been to one, you've been to an all, and we've been lucky enough to live 2.5 hours south Chicago. I live in Louisville. We see a lot of concerts and things all around the U.S., but first time, it's like going to Vegas. You see it, you're happy you did. The next time you want to go see the grittier side of things. And every time I've looked into where and what's going on with these albums, I see these little towns, these little intricate details of where they were, what they were doing, who they asked to do album artwork and things, and where they went to school. And I'm thinking, man, I might have a completely different approach to a Euro trip now versus what I would have done, just by the book.
Yeah. I think there's something to that. To me, the notion of like packing a picnic, having it along on the hillside next to Headley Grange.
I mean, here's the big thing, right? The overarching theme of what I feel like when I have friends, liquor industry. Really good friend of mine, Richie Michaels, is from London. I think the essence I always get looking at these bands, talking to these individuals that are from across the pond, if you will, is they just have this slower demeanor to life in a good way. Like they've always have it come across like they've got it all figured out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like we may be strung with anxiety thinking like we've got to be successful, do this, that, and the other. I don't know what it is, man, but like every time I meet someone from across the pond, it's like they've sort of just got that part figured out. And they're sort of just on the wave that is life. And it's just always all encompassed and something that I've always envied because it just is the way. And I'm thinking it must just be a product of the location in which they come from. And they're probably thinking the exact opposite. These dudes live in the hustle and bustle. It's incredible how they manage that because there's just shit going on all the time. Maybe they were sort of like had to go into it because to us it would be like coming up in like Mahomet or Monticello and finally getting a chance to hit the big city. I don't know. But it's just insane to me to think about that and what they've done. And then, we get to look back and research these things of the small towns and things that they did because it's documented now because they're a historic piece of it and see these things, know, so
they go to Headley Grange just to focus really. And I think after being on the road for as much as they were, like you said, at a certain point, another city is just another city in a nameless run of cities. So they go to Headley Grange, which is this mansion. It's damp, it's cold, but it did focus them. And they enjoyed it enough, or didn't hate it, I should say, to do most of 4 at Headley Grange. Now, what they did was the Rolling Stones, the band, had a mobile studio. And they bring that along. So you essentially have a studio outside. They have all the wires coming into a big room at Headley Grange where the band can jam. It wasn't until Led Zeppelin IV that they figured out, let's put the drums for when the levee breaks at the top of the stairs and then get that big boomy sound. For this one, it's much more about, okay, we're in a room, we're playing together. Additional recording at Olympic Studios in London. Now, here's my theory. This album sounds too clean to have been mostly recorded at Headley Grange. I think this sounds like a Olympic studio album where they're in a controlled environment, there's a crispness, there's a professionalism to it, and then overdubs were done at Island Records, Island Studios. So in the early days of Island Records, that is located in Notting Hill. Lovely movie, which I coincidentally, just watched last night. Mixing done at Arden Studios in Memphis in August during yet another Led Zeppelin U.S. tour. So over the course of a few days, Jimmy holes up in Memphis. They knock it out. Produced by him, engineered by Andy Johns. Do you remember Glenn from album 1?
Yes.
Andy is the younger brother. Glenn have never produced or engineered for Zeppelin again. And also on board was Terry Manning. So there were 2 engineers that were helping out. And both of them, I think, big contributors to this because there is such a great sonic clarity to this album that I don't think Zeppelin quite captured again. So, yeah, I love the production of this. I think that despite the really short time frame, they put together a really good album, sonically speaking, that doesn't necessarily jive with the limited time they spent on it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because going through that myself, reading and taken away from each location and how this was put together, I thought about our trip, and you could pull the year out like it was your job. I'm not as good at that as you are, but our trip to Memphis, and one of our big bucket list items was hitting Sun Studios. And, you know, for 17, 18-year-old something kid taking the train down from Champaign to Memphis on the city of New Orleans with his best friend, watching Clockwork Orange. Maybe we were a little older than that. What, 19?
No,
20?
we were. If it was 2009, we were both 21 going on 22. No, 22.
Shit, right.
It was senior year.
No. Wow, you're right. So that was like right before I left for Louisville.
February of 2009. So what we do, yeah, you're right. We get on the Amtrak, City of New Orleans, overnighter, with a bottle of Wild Turkey 101 and an iPod Classic playing Clockwork Orange, which is what you do. I don't know how long I made it into that movie before the 101 hit me right in the noggin and got some shut-eye. Smelled very much of cheap booze when my sister and now brother-in-law picked us up.
And I did not sleep. I was watching that thing at length, and as my first experience with that, got down there. But I just remember, man, thinking like, and that was my first true experience in a recording studio, albeit the fact it's pretty much a museum now. They're still doing some stuff down there when you want. But to walk into that place, I can only imagine it's the feeling that you would get for some folks walking into like the Coliseum or others. Like, I'm not a huge Elvis fan, but knowing some of the albums that were put together there, Rattle and Hum, U2, some other things that we've clearly watched, and you see those paneled walls with the holes in them, you just know when you walk in. And the thing that always gets me, whether I'm in a museum or anywhere for that matter, and I look at the backdrop for that, you always have this thought in your head. You're like, is that still the same thing, or have they like reproduced this to look like it was when they were here? But I was looking back at that Memphis location that they, did a lot of final cuts here for this album, and I think that actual location has since been redone or moved. It got hit by a storm, I believe, the first one, if I'm correct. But nonetheless, man, it just brought me right back to that kind of journey and that thought of, where, what, and how at the point of thinking of this recording.
Ardent is still active, it looks like.
It is. I don't think it's the original.
Oh, it may not be. Yeah, you're right. So the Ardent Studios itself has been around for 7 decades. It is located in Memphis, Midtown Memphis, and it does look... Yeah, look at this. Okay, so on Thanksgiving weekend 1971, so this is a year after Led Zeppelin III comes out, it fully moved to its current location on Madison Avenue with 2 studios. So, yeah, it's an amazing music city because you also had Stax Records down there. The one thing at Sun Studios that really stood out to me on that trip was they had a little amplifier that Ike Turner brought to record Rocket 88. There's really good tour guides down to Sun Studios, and the way they told it, if this is, mythologizing it a bit, that's fine, but that they were driving to the studio, Ike Turner and his band, to record Rocket 88, and the amp fell off the top of his station wagon, and it got busted. And it organically gave him a distorted tone. So Rocket 88 is known as the first rock and roll song ever with a distorted tone, thanks to, as Eddie Kramer would put it for Led Zeppelin II, a happy accident or happy mistake. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Bob Ross, shout out Bob Ross there with the happy accident again.
Yes.
But no, you're right. Yeah. And I always think about that. It's like, okay, how much of this is real? How much of it is paying the bills for who buys tickets to these things and hears these clever stories that come up? But it may be real. And if it is, that's just too cool for what we now know today as distortion and rock music. But yeah, I do remember that tidbit. And my big takeaway was just watching Rattle and Hum through you as a massive U2 fan, most of which was black and white, and then walking into the same setting of what you see, throughout that film. And I just remember it being so powerful because, again, back then you see, you watch, you hear. When you break away from your hometown, and you're sort of in history, there's an unmistakable feeling that you get when you're in that moment, and you're kind of like, whoa, like it's not every day you get to do something like this. And the lineage of the Glenn and his brother and things like that, you just wonder, like, are these guys, are they taking this in the moment? This is also something I thought about when I was sort of researching this journey that they had. Like, are they taking this in, and is that some of the reason for the hiatus of heading up to the cottage and having the breakdown of how they put this album together? To sort of relish in what they've already accomplished and then what they're doing next? Or are they still just like fully encapsulated in what they do for a living? You'd never know. I mean, it's like asking a pro athlete, like, when was the last time you slowed down to realize how good you are? It's like, I don't know. I've been doing this my whole life, man. I don't think about it.
I think it's a mix of them being professional about it and knowing it's a job to do. I think there's a little less pressure as just an engineer and not a producer, because at that point it was very clear. And Andy would have heard from his brother, you're not going to be the producer. I don't care what they tell you. Jimmy's going to be the producer. So you might as well just settle back, and your whole gig is to make things sound really good, which he and Terry Manning did. So they get this done in August. It is released in October of 1970. The exact date, which is really pathetic research on my part. Let me make sure. I think it's October 5th, 1970. October 5th, 1970. So is it time to get into the track-by-track breakdown?
It is, man.
Oh, my God. All right, well, let's do that. So, needs no introduction. Immigrant Song. In a list of Led Zeppelin openers, here are the openers on albums 1 through 4. And I'm going to kind of separate this from Houses of the Holy, and I'll call that Latter-day Zeppelin. I think the first 4 kind of stand together because it was recorded in such a short time period. You got Good Times, Bad Times, Whole Lotta Love, Immigrant Song, Black Dog. This band knew how to start an album. And in terms of just sheer punch you in the mouth, this is perhaps the most effective because of its brief running time. And 15 seconds in, Robert Plant gives literally an otherworldly vocal that had never been remotely heard of by the human ear. I don't think I'm exaggerating saying that. It is still frightening, whatever he does with his voice.
Yeah. Multiple takeaways for me on this one for multiple reasons, but purely just listening and relishing in what it is that was heard at the exact time of this release. It's like, holy cow. Like, you imagine just, like I say, dropping that needle and rolling into this album, and that's what you are greeted with.
Well, first, keep in mind, you're greeted with a tape hiss, which Jimmy loves this weird shit. You got the cough on Whole Lotta Love. You got the tape hiss on this. Before Led Zeppelin IV really kicks off with Black Dog, you got this weird guitar strum, which he referred to as the guitar army waking up. So this 3-album run where it's not your typical even first thing that you hear, he wanted to make it weird.
Yep. For listeners on this journey with us, obviously when you hear this song, to me and Mike, you and I, it was part of our repertoire for playing live in our band. Not an easy song by any standards, but one that felt good to play and did exactly what they do when they kick this album off, which is just a statement and an impact. and for how short the song is, man, what just a massive just hello, right? So, but I think obviously about things like School of Rock for Marvel fans, Thor.
It's in a Thor movie?
Twice, dude. Twice, yeah. Pretty powerful scenes too, which is just awesome. It just works. I mean, it's perfectly written almost for these moments of those. Well, I guess the opposite. Those moments were written specifically to highlight this song. But some interesting takeaways about like even School of Rock is that Richard Linklater tried to get it approved and did not. So Jack Black took to the media that is social and had his followers blast him singing it himself, which always reminds me of our beloved friend Kent Elmore. His own rendition, which at that point it was through the cosmos that is social media put in front of Jimmy Page, who gave his blessing to go ahead and use it in the film.
Early days of social media, and then it was really it was a DVD extra on School of Rock, because I remember renting that in the tail end of, we sold the Blockbuster on Neil. We had a family video up by my parents' place, and I think School of Rock came out in 03, maybe 03.
Oh yeah.
So I honestly think this is MySpace era that it would have gotten uploaded, but they did send it directly to Led Zeppelin's representatives, and it is Jack Black performing it. I think the School of Rock kids are with him, and they recorded that scene, if I recall, in the big auditorium hall where the finale of School of Rock takes place, which is really one of the best finales of any movie. I mean, they absolutely nailed. What a joyous movie. I mean, it really is. And that scene where they get back in the van after qualifying for the Battle of the Bands and Immigrant Song starts, I got chills. It is an eternal rock song, and I mentioned this in the first episode, and I'll be brief with it, but it is literally my first musical memory, along with Where the Streets Have No Name by Zeppelin. And it's funny how, is it me remembering it, or is it because my parents, and especially my dad, talked about that anecdote? But it was this song that he would put on Led Zeppelin III. I thought the wheel was so cool. It was my first, whoa, what's an album cover? Look at this. There's so many things to look at. For a kid, it's a treasure trove of visuals. And then that song starts, and I think it's so cool, but I also think it's a little bit scary. And I don't know. I mean, I still play it with the band to this day, and I can't imagine. And we've said this with Zeppelin. If I'm a broken record, I'm sorry, but I can't imagine October of 1970 putting this record on and hearing this shit. Are you fucking kidding me? Where did this come from?
And I think that's why that scene in School of Rock is so perfect for me, is because you have to think Jack thought the same exact thing that we're thinking, or that we experienced, which is gets in that van and it's like, here you go. I mean, there's one clear answer to what song would be played in that moment for him. So, yeah, man, I'm with you. That lead off to this album again, 1, 2, 3 is like, okay, like not disappointed in any capacity. However, the recording of it, the impact of it, I think does more for me specifically in just the moment. Like, I don't know what it is, the rumble of how it starts, the battle cry, if that makes sense. I mean, it's clearly done in this, I'm not even going to call it a freight train. It's like, I mean, it kind of is freight train-ish, but it's not. I think that would bode more towards like a metal thought. This is just like energetic, wake it up. I don't know what it is for me, man. It's just something, and it's new. It's like, it's not just the normal riff rock that, you would be used to. This is something completely different, but I wouldn't immediately replay it if it were my first time through, but man, I'd be thinking about it. Like, it would just resonate with me until I wrapped the album up and I'd go right back to the top. That's what I got from it.
What Zeppelin was so good at, and Jimmy Page writing these riffs, space. The riff isn't do 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 do. You see, a lot of times you think that the riff is dun 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 dun. Okay, and the drums, the bottom is playing boom 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 boom. So he's just mimicking that. There's space though. The guitar is not that heavily distorted. Back to the Whole Lotta Love effect, right? The real moment where this song kicks off, the vocals, of course, but then they wait for John Paul to come in, until that first E. Boom, come from the land of the ice. And then now the bass is in the song. As this on your right channel, because the guitar is all left. The rhythm guitar is all in your left can, all right? On the right can, the verse starts and there's a tremolo treated guitar. It's just there for effect, kind of shimmers. That is when the song kicks off, because the bass, if you listen to the mix, is yet again higher than the guitar. This is Jimmy Page's producer saying this song will have maximum impact if it's the moment the bass comes in. So he doesn't crank his guitar up to 11. In fact, it kind of doesn't have a twang, but it's certainly not sounding like he's playing that thing like he would live, where it was distorted to hell, right? I think that's the cool thing about this, and some other riff rockers like Celebration Day, which we're going to talk about, doesn't have the craziest distorted guitars, but it rocks.
No, I love your word twang, because I take the same thoughts away from multiple tracks on this album, man. Like this one, Celebration Day, there's a few more where the twang is what I hear, and it's almost like, man, if I were in like Gillies listening to a band, you know, it's like this is what I would expect to hear. It's not like overdone distortion where it's just lost and you're just feeling the power from the amp. You're actually hearing something. It just happens to coincide with the bass and the drums that is making the overall impact here for what I'm getting from it. And lyrically, I mean, got to call out a spade, but Hammer of the Gods, man. Like when he hits this, to me, it's like, holy shit. Like, I mean, you know, oddly enough, and I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it now, that is not my...
Spiciest?
No, not Spiciest, and it's not my killer line, because I just thought it would be all too obvious as the name of the book, and you know, a clear impact leading off track one of Led Zeppelin III. But man, I mean, it's impossible not to have a takeaway from what your feeling is when he delivers that line. Mm-hmm. You know, so yeah, just no surprise, but
interesting lineage with this song. So the lyrics were inspired by a gig in Iceland on June 22nd, 1970. So I'm trying to put this timeline together and figure, okay, they're recording in May and June. I think they must have had the music, and then the lyrics came or finalized after this trip to Iceland. And Robert Plant, here's a quote from him. "We weren't being pompous. We did come from the land of the ice and snow. We were guests of the Icelandic government on a cultural mission. We were invited to play a concert in Reykjavik." Is that how they say it? "And the day before we all arrived at the civil, and we arrived, all the civil servants went on strike, and the gig was going to be canceled. The university prepared a concert hall for us, and it was phenomenal. The response from the kids was remarkable, and we had a great time. Immigrant Song was about that trip, and it was the opening track on the album that was intended to be incredibly different." So I think the lyrics, he might have had the yell, but the "come from the land of the ice and snow, hammer of the gods, will drive our ships to new land, fight the horde, sing." I mean, he has also been quoted as saying, you know, it's kind of a funny song. I mean, like, you shouldn't take the lyrics too seriously. It is metal imagery, or what came to be known as a lot of heavy metal imagery, sure, but was kind of coined here. And he's saying it was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he also says, yeah, it sounded cool. And that's why he chose the words that he chose. And I would agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also just the first essence where you're like, man, these guys are storytellers, whether it's real or not. And Robert's clearly a poet. And I think, too, I mean, we'll get to it, but just his ability in this album to really put his stamp on the lyrics. I know we have discussed it in Zeppelin I, Zeppelin II, where, man, are the lyrics the big takeaway here? I think it's more just sonically what's happening and the fact that this band was brought together in a lightning strike. But if you just read the lyrics out loud, it was probably the two toughest albums of all time, in my opinion, to like pick away killer lines. Because I was like, I mean, if I wrote this on a piece of paper and handed it to any of you, you'd be like, okay, like I'm not really sure where you're going with it. It's not monumental to read, you know, a few of the takeaways that are the larger songs on Zeppelin 1 and 2. This one was extremely difficult because he was all over it. I know there's only all but one or two tracks that were heavily Paged influence. Tangerine and a few others I think were a collaboration of Page and Robert, but for the most part it was all Robert, yes, right? That took over the lyrics for this album, which is another astounding thing, man, because like, you know how much Jimmy has his hand in everything, top to bottom, and to finally relinquish the reins, so to speak, to Robert in this capacity may have had a lot to do with the fact that they were holed up in a place with no electricity, and they finally had trust in each other for what was to come, which is incredible to get from this album, man. Like, imagine that. Like, we can sense that.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine how powerful that must have felt for Jimmy to be able to be like, man, weight lifted, breath of fresh air. Like, not only do we have a guy that can deliver the sonic lyrics that we need, but he can also write this shit too. And I think in a playful way, Immigrant Song to me comes off like they can be playful, but goddamn, dude, like, you're not looking at it that way back then. You're listening to this like as gospel. You're listening to I Come from the Land of the Ice and Snow, and you're like, fuck yeah, I'm right there with you, dude. Like, it wasn't a joke. So it's so cool, man. It's like they approached it in such a clever way, and I love the lore around that song too, and kind of how they encapsulated that. But he's all over this, man, and it starts with this song to me, because it's like, I can have fun, but just wait.
This album, I remember looking at the album cover when I was younger, and there was a black and white image that's doctored of the band and their faces. And this is Robert Plant, fully Golden God era, the longest of hair that he had. I mean, he basically, early days of Zeppelin, it was more shoulder length. And then by Led Zeppelin II, it's growing. By Led Zeppelin III, he just keeps it down past his shoulders. So he's the Golden God already. And on this image, you see Jimmy at the top, and he's got dark hair, and he looks kind of mysterious. And then at the bottom, you see Robert Plant, but they don't list their names on the cover. So I'm looking at the credits, and I'm trying to figure out who's who. And my dad was like, well, yeah, I mean, Jimmy Page, I'm pretty sure guitar, Robert Plant was the same. Well, and then he could point to their faces. That's Robert Plant. Okay, fine. When I listened to this album, I assumed that, like most quintessential rock bands, well, I just assumed Robert was the driving force of the band. Based on Immigrant Song, based on the vocals, based on the look of this dude on the cover, wow, like, I don't know what a sexy guitar or a Golden God would be, but this must be it, before I knew what the words were. So I guess that's a way of me saying that this album, unlike the first two, he wasn't a hired hand by any stretch anymore. Not saying he was in the first two, but it was very much Jimmy running the ship. Now we have a partnership, and it happened very quickly and very organically. Yeah.
I assure the listeners we're going to get on with it, but I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because you specifically, for those that don't know, spearheaded your musical journey as a drummer. You now are the lead vocalist, guitar, writer, producer, booking agent, so on and so forth for your current band, and have been for a number of years through different iterations and so forth. And even from the first time we ever met, you had a clear insight on the journey that you wanted to take in your musical profession, right? I now, knowing you, knowing Zeppelin, knowing other bands that have had a similar essence of somebody that just has this ungodly ability to prioritize, have the creative side fully, and just the vision. And a lot of times that you see the web diagram in your head and you're just like, guys, I got it. Like, just follow me and I promise you that we will go to the promised land. I'm not saying that Made or Sagacity or anything went to the promised land, but damn it, I felt like we did back then. So, job well done. Thing is, though, you're right. Listening and seeing all of this unfold, if I were just put on the spot back then to say Zeppelin 1, Zeppelin 2, Zeppelin 3, who is the, undisputed leader here? Like, Jimmy, to me, in early years, seemed like a very timid and, like, reserved dude. Like, I didn't see interviews as a kid. I just saw him for what he was on stage. And, like, aside from the, that he does with his lips and, the little explosions you can see him do as he's counting within the song, he was sort of reserved for the most part, right? Robert was the one that was extravagant, shirt unbuttoned all the way down, but tucked in, dangling the microphone over his head. You and I saw a cover band of Zeppelin multiple times growing up called Zoso. I'm sure we'll get to them at some point. Seeing them live kind of helped formulate this thought that I had too, which aligns with what you thought. It's like, yeah, this is the guy. This is probably the brains behind everything they're doing. It's a well-calculated approach. Come to find out that it's this guy who, came from other bands. And then you also look at the hosts, like John Paul Jones was no stranger to how this shit went, dude. He was a studio musician and a very professional one who came in, and it's like he knows how to take orders. He also knows how to put his spin on it. At this point, he's well into 2 decades of performing in different capacities under pretty strict expectations. So like now it's a little bit more artistic, and we get to Zeppelin III where it's like, hey man, not only do you get a chance to have a little bit of artistic approach here, you got the whole fucking canvas, because we'll talk about him, but John Paul Jones on this album with the orchestra compilations and the synth and the introduction of the organ as opposed to the bass, man, it's like, okay, so from just a casual listener going through this album, starting with Immigrant Song, you can tell they're onto something here that might take a different approach from 1 and 2, in my opinion. And just wanted to point out there that like it's so cool now looking back. Yeah, Jimmy was the brains of the operation, but to me it was Robert, just the way that he goes about it and goes into this album lyrically. And again, I think it backs up the fact that you and I probably started our journey in Zeppelin 3 or 4 back then, and we were like working our way backwards and then forwards. So to us, this is like my first experience. 4 was like my first experience, and at that point, it would make sense of why I would think Robert was the front runner, because this album sort of highlights that.
Yeah, Robert's voice has a quality to it on 3 and 4 that he didn't touch. Again, something changed before Houses of the Holy. And a couple other things about Immigrant Song before we move on to a wacky number 2, just a weird number 2, is John Bonham, not a single fill on this track. He serves the song. He plays the groove, and he plays it well, and he's consistent, and that's it. That's the drum part, but it's really good. John Paul Jones, the fills, whenever you get to On We Sweep with, and he's when we play it live, our bass player Mike is really good, but even he's like, Jesus Christ, like with this bass line is impossible. It's so precise how he plays it. It's just a true pro. And out of all the vocals, there's the opening okay, well that's what we all know, but to me the coolest delivery of Robert in the song is, so now you better stop, and he does this thing, oh my God, he cuts it just right, and there's this scream kind of, I don't know what he did, man. His voice is so good on this album. So wanted to shout out that line because we know the yell. We know the what would we call it? Banshee wail at the beginning of the song. But that little line right there is so good. And it's just a great little punch to kick things off, which leads into Friends. Now, this is one that at a young age, you go from 2.5 minutes of Immigrant Song, and then you hear the band kind of dicking around the studio. Ba-doom, doo, ba-doom. You hear a little bass line. And you hear Jimmy strum the first note. And if you listen close, Ben, the way this is tuned, the low string is from an E all the way down to a C. You hear the rattle of the string because it's so freaking loose. And then it gets going, and there's some congas, and I didn't know what to make of it at a young age, but I'm still kind of scared because there is a really ominous tone to Friends that is unlike any other acoustic song on this album.
And it makes sense because obviously now knowing, right, it was a C6, right?
The tuning? Yeah, so here's what it was. I got it listed here. The tuning was C, A, C, G, C, E. If I'm thinking about it,
so that's the harmony, right? But the tuning itself was something that he equates to being quote unquote C6, which is something he just came up with because it sounded good, which I agree with. And like you said, ominous. I promise you that I'm not spoiling anything in terms of our rankings or Spicy Biscuit here, but I have a huge, huge love affair with this song. It's what I visit most on this album.
You have an anecdote about this song, right?
I do, and I want to get to that. It's a little bit no surprise here for our listeners, long-winded, but Friends to me is something where like in listening to this album, I'm like I will be 100% transparent and honest with myself that and everyone that I if I'm going back to this album, it's to visit this song. It's not like an
Wow.
Immigrant Song or Out on the Tiles or anything. I'll go to a live album or somewhere else for some of those tunes. Friends from this album is like the distinct takeaway for me where I'm like, holy shit, dude, it's just so different. I like one and two, right? We had a few of those tracks on each one of those where I'm like, to me, it was what can I revisit the most? Wasn't necessarily the spiciest biscuit, but it's like, God, like something else is happening here. That ominous tone, um, the approach that they went at it. And I'll just go ahead and get to my anecdote, quickly so that we can kind of work through this.
Yeah,
But
and before you do, Ben, like you mentioned, ominous tone. There is a hypnotic drone-like quality, and the other song in Zeppelin's catalog that is most similar to this, and why they recorded both of these in Bombay in 1972, is Four Sticks. It is the true pre-Kashmir. This and Four Sticks were the Middle Eastern sounding songs, and I probably prefer Four Sticks as a song, but I don't view this necessarily as a precursor because as a song, it's fully formed and arranged. And I revisit. There are very few times, Ben, where I listen to Immigrant Song and then I say, "Oh, I'm going to skip ahead of Celebration Day." I want to listen to this song
yeah,
because I think it's part of the package.
yeah. And admittedly enough, man, there's times I've gone to this album I don't even ever hit Immigrant Song. I love it. No diss on what that is or what it has been for us, but to me, it's all about this, and it may have some. I mean, the string section from JPJ, the haunting yet comforting tone and tuning that is something that I've never heard of before, or really anybody for that matter at that point. Um, but I do remember exactly where I was. No surprise when I heard this song for the first time. And here's the other takeaway. I've mentioned him every single episode now, so it's
Harry?
get extremely old. But Don Elmore,
Oh.
for the third time, and I'm thinking almost the last, but I also know the fact that we're moving on to House of the Holy, so probably not. I know exactly where I was. I know exactly what was happening when I heard this song. And I'm going to go deep here, guys, with a lot of fucking detail because it is so vivid for me on exactly the day, the exact moment, what was happening.
How old were you?
I was in eighth grade.
Okay.
So 12, 13, I was older, so I was 13. Here we go. Let me set this tone here, guys. 13 years old, eighth grade, Champaign, Illinois. Early morning, you got to get dressed, you got to get ready for school, that whole shebang. Mostly a drag. This day was not a drag. This was the final day of eighth grade, which were always the best days.
Hey, I'm about to experience that myself as a teacher.
You are, man, for the first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an eighth grade teacher for the first time, usually sixth grade here, and we'll get to that in a second. Um, Eighth grade year, there was something about it. It wasn't because I knew I was moving on the next year. That seemed endless. That seemed like it was forever away. I was just eyeballing summer. And the last day of school, as most know, is just the most euphoric feeling of all time because the teachers are done, the reins are off, right? There's no expectation. All you really have to do, which I guess you really didn't have to do back then, is just show up, but you wanted to, the same capacity. So, in the 90s, early 2000s, what was the biggest thing to do? It was to get your fit right, get ready for summer, go out with a bang, get your yearbook signed, figure out what everybody was doing for the summer, and move on. Well, um, Kenton Elmore and I, we would carpool to school. Kenton was a year younger than I in school. He was seventh grade. I was eighth grade. So our parents would reciprocate in who would take and who would pick up very often. Ken had band practice a lot after school, so sometimes that differed, but usually you could bet your bottom dollar that we were riding to school together in some capacity. We lived all of, 6 blocks away from each other, right in your now neighborhood, Mike. So, the brick streets with the putter underneath your tires every time you pulled home, something we know very well. So, long story short, at this point, Don drove a 1999 gold 4-door Nissan Maxima.
Damn.
Leather interior.
Ooh.
It was crispy. It had a great sound system in it, which, as all of Don Elmore's cars have had, this was one of those. And he picked me up. And here's the thing. I know exactly what I was wearing. I know exactly what I was thinking. I'm heading to the final days of 8th grade. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get to summertime, ready to move on. I was wearing a short-sleeved, button-down plaid shirt that was green with little subtle orange undertones, green cargo shorts, and a pair of Jordan 12 lows that were like slate gray, and I had orange laces in them because I had that orange undertone of plaid. Dude, it was top to bottom. I was feeling it. I was ready to go. I hear the Maxima roll up, and it is literally thumping outside the front of my house. And I'm like, oh, the Elmers are here, and it was always like a maybe 1-2 seconds as they pulled up where there was a honk. It was the old Elmer, like, move it, dude. We're already waiting on you.
Get your ass in here.
Busting out of the house. And I go to get in the back seat, and they're like pointing at me to go on the other side. I realize that Frankie, their full-size Labrador, is in the back seat. I'm like, now, I got to admit, this is probably the first time Don or Ken would hear this side of the story, but I'm thinking, God damn it. Like, I'm about to go to school, guys, and I've got this fucking lab that sheds like a monkey literally sitting in the back seat with me as I've got this fresh outfit on. So, it's just one of those instances. And I'm like, all right, well, whatever. And I know he's going to kiss on me and love on me as soon as I get in the car.
But you don't want that. You're wearing fresh threads, man.
In hindsight, I'll take it all day, dude. I miss Frankie to death, and it's just one of those things. But in the moment, yeah, man, I wanted to get to school crispy and get out and, continue on. Well, get in the back seat. He's loving on me. He's hanging out. We're driving. Pull around the corner. We get onto University Avenue. We're heading to school, and Don puts on Friends. No joke. He throws it on, and from the moment it starts, I'm just like usual with Don, I'm like, what is this, dude? Who is this? He's like, you know who this is. This is Zeppelin. Holy shit, what album is this? Zeppelin III. No conversation about what it came after, what came next. It was just Friends, and I was like listening to it. And I just remember thinking how comforting but ominous and eerie it was, and there was comfort in that. How unique it was, but how familiar it sounded, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. We pull off of Prospect Avenue to, I kicking myself that I can't remember the street that my middle school was on. But
Harvard Street?
Perhaps. It's right before Judah Christian.
Yeah.
You take a right, and drop off was on that street. And I just am enjoying the song, dude. And, I look over, and Frankie is sort of like keeling a little bit in a very odd way. And I'm like, what the hell is this dog doing? And I sort of see the buses lined up, and we're getting close to where Don literally like tuck and rolls us. He's always like, get out, like, see you boys later. And the usual shindig of our school drop off, as it's always controlled chaos, right? Which you well know. Mm-hmm. And I look over, and I'm like, and I'm kind of trying to say something, but this music is blasting, the windows are down, and, we're just joyriding as some boys on our, last day of 8th grade. And I see Frankie just vomit this like perfect string of like olive green vomit that is like compacted. So it's kind of like reminiscent to like the inside of a Reese's cup. Like it's like congealed, but like put together, and it just hits the seat next to me, and I sort of come off the butt of my seat as to not get all this on me in any capacity. And I'm sort of trying to say something to Kenton and Don, and they're like, what? No, what's going on? And I'm like, Frankie just puked. God damn it. And like in 2 seconds from that reaction, Frankie just starts to eat it up. Oh my God. And I'm like, dude, get me out of the car. But I don't want to be insensitive in the moment. You're in your best friend's parents' car, and as close as Don and I are and were, it was still that thing where there's that separation of like, I'm not his son, I'm in his car. I don't want to just like be insensitive to the moment and be like, I'm out of here. Good luck with your pukey dog.
Of course.
Your car on your black leather. Nonetheless, though, I was like thankful I didn't get it in my lap or on my fit, man, after the thoughts I had as I was getting in. And Kenton's kind of just chuckling, and he's like, all right, man, well, we'll see you later. And the car speeds off, and I'm just like, all right, dude, like, I'll catch you later. Have a great, last day. And eighth graders, I think, got out just a little bit earlier than the other classes, right? We had like some exploratory thing going on, and then we were done. But such a vivid memory of that, and it dawned on me as I'm listening to this mowing the lawn that all of that has been a staple of my memory for the longest time. I like think back to that day and chuckle like probably more than you would think I do. I don't think about it daily, but I think about it pretty often. It wasn't until I listened to this song that I realized, and it all came together like glue of what I was actually listening to during that, and it was Friends. So,
Man.
just an insane essence of the whole nine and how I think about that song. So to go all the way back to the starting of the episode when you were talking about what does this album mean in terms of time of the year for you, it's definitely a summer album and probably the closest summer album that I've personally had to something like can't believe I'm even putting this in the same category, and I'm not categorizing it with.
Let's hear it.
Stand Up, Dave. It was towards the tail end of our one of our high school years going into the summer. It's when you get a hold of something, and for me it was Friends. And so what I did was, the allure of summer came and went, and I think it was like, I don't know, definitely within the first week of summer, I was home, I was on the computer, and I was winamping the other tracks that I'd missed from Friends. And I think I was trying to coerce Don into, which he'll also be listening to this and agreeing with me here, trying to coerce him into letting me borrow yet another album, which he probably would never see again. So he did not let me borrow Zeppelin III. He let me borrow a lot of them, including a band called Galactic Cowboys, which he's never seen again. Shout out, Don. I promise I'll get you another copy of Galactic Cowboys someday. But I remember then going top to bottom through this album, and it was because of that track. Mm-hmm. So no surprise I revisit it as often as I do, but definitely something that resonated with me all summer, because in those moments where you're like, I just need something to put on, going out for a bike ride, going to the park, I'm at home, it's late at night, I'm going to throw on Zeppelin III. And so like, this is really when like I started catching wind of like, I've got these core memories based around music. It's not music that's based around these core memories. Like as a kid, Dad's playing Zeppelin 1 or 2 again. This is like, I'm choosing to now put this on. And Zeppelin 3 was like when I was finally like, I'm putting this on. Like I've got all the means. I've got Winamp, I've got Napster, rocking and roll, and getting this thing going. So
I love that story. And I think that there is some, while I cannot match the Frankie vomiting in the Nissan Sentra, Maxima, and the leather interior next to you on your fresh threads, or fortunately not on them. But I think it's fair to say that if you are listening to this album the first time and Friends gets you and you're in it, then you're in it for the rest of the album, because it is such a dramatic departure from Immigrant Song in some ways. In another, what I love about this 1-2 punch, they're both weird. This is not Good Times, Bad Times, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, which are fairly standard songwriting arrangements, chords that you would know, vocal melodies that are familiar. So I think that it is a really cool placement for a song that does not have a drum set, that does not have an electric guitar. It on sonic levels is maybe a little bit. Oh, there's the car. Look at that. I see. Wow, that is one nice whip there. 1999 Nissan Maxima. I can see the Elmores riding around that. And poor Frankie and his big old Labrador head in the back. He was a good dog.
This is pre-Envoy. This is all Don Elmore right now. But when I tell you that the sound system was fucking powerful, dude, it was next level, man.
He wouldn't have it any other way, man. So yeah, I think that Friends is an excellent track too. And I liked it younger. And I thought, well, okay, you don't even get a chance to think what's next, because all of a sudden it's ending. Got to give credit to John Paul Jones and his string arrangement. So cool when that really kicks in. I think Robert Plant's vocals and his little vocal ticks throughout, amazing. And then it ends. Okay, we got a Moog. What the hell is this?
Moog synth, man.
Love it.
Like into Celebration Day.
Going from a C down to an A. Celebration Day rock riff in A, but it is not a normal rock riff. It is weird as shit, dude.
No, it is weird. And let me tell you, man, like really quick to button up this transition. So C6 tuning, not gonna act like I knew that forever. This is something learned as I was doing the deep dive into this, but it's not new to me in way of how it affected me in listening to it. And I just think back, we talk about it a little bit, but like the grunge era,
Hmm.
a lot of the takeaways from a band like Soundgarden or dude, even like Mark Lanigan and the Screaming Trees, like they did peculiar ass tuning that is why I listened because it affected me in a different way. It wasn't just something you turned on the radio and you heard like this, that, or the other. It wasn't pop. It wasn't, country. It was something that was like, this is coming from a place, dude. Holy crap. And that song into Celebration Day is like the essence of that. And it may have been the precursor for what these bands were sort of taking from it in their writing styles, because it's just like, let's go with this dark and ominous tone and tuning and put these amazing type vocals over these songs, and you find joy. But if you really isolate the track down, man, it's just deep and dark and strange. And then you get this Moog synth, and yet again, easy for us to sort of in hindsight look back and say, hey, this is a moment where we know, dude, 1970, you're sitting here listening to that. Like,
What is this?
what is really going through your head whenever a track seamlessly goes to another one with that, and it's something you never heard of before? And then you get into Celebration Day, and then you get this lovely and just crispy. And when I say crispy, dude, I've crispy.
You're of course talking. My face is cracked from smiling with no reverb, nothing.
Nothing, dude. Just as crisp and plain as day, Robert Plant. I mean, in that moment, I'm thinking like, holy shit, now we're talking. I'm in my room and I'm thinking like, this is when the goosebumps and the little tiny hairs stand up on the back of your neck. You get that little zap and you're like, what the fuck's going on right now? And just as quickly, the whole band comes in and off we go. So
This song, weird riff yet again in a standard tuning. So what you get with that tuning with friends, and what you kind of get with, I think, like the dad gad tuning, which Jimmy used every so often, you get a drone-like quality. And yet, even though this is in standard tuning for Celebration Day, the riff has a drone-like quality. Of course, separate channels. So you get on one and then on the other. He's playing off the left and right really well. I love the intro. Apparently, it was by accident. So they had a drum intro along with this, and the engineer accidentally recorded over it. So they needed something to patch these two songs together. I think it works better than any drum along with the guitar would have worked. And they ended up using that arrangement live, where Bonham came in as he did on the studio cut. Another cool thing production-wise, and it seems that pretty soon everybody's gonna... And then you hear a reverse cymbal. Boom, boom, like it leads right into it. And now John Paul Jones, who is the unsung hero, as he so often is, on this song, the bass is giving this song a gallop. I should say the rhythm section really is, because as cool as the riff is in Celebration Day, it is John Paul and John doing something together that is, it's propulsive. It's really cool, and it grooves in a very unorthodox way. And then you have, after the riff is just infectious, you get to this almost pop chorus. Ma, mama, I'm so happy I'm going to join the band. And it's got this very major key happiness to it, which belies the lyrics, which are not very happy. And I don't know, man. This is such a fun slice of riff rock, and I think one of Jimmy Page's best guitar solos.
Very fun, very awesome. There is a quote, or I guess call it lore, from the recording days of putting this together, like you stated, of the sort of symbol into what that is. But it was said to be unable, they were unable or unwilling to re-record it. So
Yes.
as a pseudo musician, I had a thought in my head that was like, maybe what they did put together originally was something that Bonham felt great about and passionate about. And he's like, well, if we're not taking that, I'm not redoing it, because it just came out of nowhere. And we know how that feels. It's like, lightning strikes and, you were very happy with it. And it's like, you guys can figure this shit out, because that's not my mistake. That's yours.
He's off at the pub anyway at this point,
Yeah.
so they got no choice.
No doubt. So I took more of the unwilling as opposed to unable, right? Which I like more. It's like, no, we'll make this work. I always think back though. It's like, what would this have been if it would have been the original, non-erased recording part? That
Not as effective, I don't think.
but probably not as effective, right? It just works exactly for what it is, and it for the time was one of those moments of yet again only 3 tracks in where you're like, what are they doing? You don't hear those things before, so like it's new, it's something fresh, and something brought to the table. The other interesting thing about it was Robert Plant's lyrics, where those were inspired by. Do you have?
Take this away because I read about it, but I didn't include it on my notes because it does sound a little bit like Fed Up with America.
Kind of more so than anything. He was just inspired by his first impressions in New York City.
That's okay. Yeah, there was the New York City, which with like allusions to the Statue of Liberty kind of thing.
Yeah, he would sometimes introduce this as the New York song. So pretty interesting as it was played through 1971 and 1973 on their live tours. Just thought it was pretty interesting there to hear that his takeaway of coming to the U.S. and their time spent in New York City was Celebration Day. It's kind of cool.
This was a staple, like as you said, in 71 and 73. It eventually dropped from the sets because their catalog was so big. They did play it at Nebworth, which was a big gig for them in 1979. They did not play it at their 2007 show, which they dubbed Celebration Day, but really for Zeppelin, that's par for the course. After all, Houses of the Holy album didn't have the song Houses of the Holy, so it's not like they haven't done that before. Jimmy Page and the Black Crowes, great recording of that on their Live at the Greek album. It was track 2 after Custard Pie, so a really good 1-2 punch to kick off that show. But yeah, great rock song. So really, so far, we do have the acoustic one in the middle, sandwiched between Immigrant Song and Celebration Day. This album still rocks, and in a way that is not as heavy-handed, I feel like, as Led Zeppelin II. As much as I love Zeppelin II, I would understand if someone listened to that and felt like it became a slog. But I do think, though, that these 2 rock songs that kick off side A do a particularly awesome job of setting the tone for the rest of the album, because while they are rock and roll songs, they're unorthodox in the way that they were constructed and performed, and it adds this eccentricity that
100%.
really makes 3 its own thing.
And do you recall sort of the way that I described Immigrant Song in way of Freight Train, which was interesting because Rick Rubin, of all people, world famous record producer, which most know, said that he feels like he's listening to a freight train, even though it's not one of their heavier songs. There's this tremendous momentum behind it, which whenever you hear the word momentum and then you listen to the song, you're like, this is exactly what I would describe to somebody as what momentum feels like if we're not in movement. The bass playing alone is just an incredible piece of how this song floats.
You know why, Ben? Because he's not in unison with John Bonham.
Not at all, dude. They are, which is unique in and of itself, but there is just so much movement and momentum, as Rick Rubin calls it, in this song, where it's just chugging, dude, and it's nonstop and it's energetic, and you sort of get to the end of it and you're like, shit, I probably need a cigarette or something, man. You just feel like you've been, done up by the boys of Led Zeppelin in this song. Can't say enough about it. It's a celebration. Surprisingly enough, this goes hand in hand with some of the spoiler alert in terms of ranking, man. I think it's going to be incredible to get through this album and discuss where we've stuck these tracks, because this is one that I will bring to the bank. Like, if I'm talking about introducing my wife or kids one day to Led Zeppelin, this will be up there with, you got to listen to that for that exact reason. It's a fucking freight train of momentum and movement, but it gets lost in the sauce. Like, at this point, they have so much. They have so many songs. They have so much influence for different approaches to songs like Friends and others that, this to me is like one that unfortunately just sort of gets like tossed out there in the ether, and you're like, oh yeah, Celebration Day. It's not right away top of mind, something that I've got to like introduce.
No, for sure. Because
Incredible.
there's so many places you got to start. And the last thing I'll say about this song, Jimmy Page at his tastiest. From the guitar solo, which is down, 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 down. It's one of those that you learn pretty quickly, and you can hum if you wanted to hum along with it. You could do every single word, every single note, and then the fade out, which is a really cool fade out, which they weren't strangers to. The down, 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 down. Down, 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 and then he does down, 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 down. Just cool fills, man. Just Jimmy Page, who was such a tasteful studio guitarist. I think a better studio than live guitarist, where he can get a little bit messy. But yeah.
I'll tell you what I've got here.
Yeah. What you got?
This was before I read that piece of Rick Rubin's takeaway. Excuse me. Not heavy, but a ball-busting stink face pace. So, like, just where you're like, where is this coming from? What am I listening to? I love it. Like, the only other songs that do this to me, man, are like those. Again, I'm not spoiling it because it's not my spicy biscuit,
Sure.
But they are the spiciest of biscuits, and it's from a peculiar place where it's like, my face does this. Can't see it. You're listening to a podcast, but it does this, and
It goes like,
I'm trying to figure out what is happening and where this is taking me. And yeah, man, like, not heavy, but a ball busting stink face pace is what I wrote. So I think that's my takeaway for Celebration Day there. So
well said. So we go from the riff rock, or an orthodox riff rock, of Celebration Day to blues. A blues epic, if you will. Since I've Been Loving You is about 7.5 minutes, 7:24, I think is the official time. A song that Led Zeppelin had worked for Led Zeppelin II, but it didn't quite come to fruition the way that they wanted it to. And a song that then became, at least in their minds, and I think for some fans too, an unimpeachable Zeppelin classic. Now, I'll let you know that my early experiences with this song as a younger Zeppelin fan, I understood that it was expertly played, but I wasn't able to find the same hook into it that I maybe was with other songs on Zeppelin III. But when you listen to this with no distractions, on a good set of headphones or in your car, and really crank it up, it is pretty astounding that they basically did this track live in a take. It's four guys just, I think we talked about this with Lemon Song on Led Zeppelin II. That was fun. That was goofy. This is a band that you could tell is concentrating, every single one of them, to knock out this phenomenal take. And I don't know, man. The older I get and the more I listen to this album, this is up there. This is incredible. And what I used to maybe consider not boring, but man, this is a long song. No, it needs to be 7:24. You have talked about, I want you to remind our listeners of your theory about bands all too often cutting a good thing short and how it might apply to this one.
Sure. Timely too, right? Because Out on the Tiles to me is ungodly short for what we get from it and the riff and how amazing it could be if they decided to stretch that thing. I think mission accomplished here, though. It has been revered as the hardest to record, potentially the hardest Zeppelin song to record, because they did it live with very little overdubbing, if at all.
They did, for clarity's sake, the guitar solo was an overdub. But if you listen on your headphones or in the car, the left channel is Jimmy the whole time. And that rhythm track is playing throughout. So that rhythm track, him, John, Paul, John, all together, that's live.
Right. And that's sort of the essence of what I'm getting to there, is that one take, albeit the overdubbed solo there, but I think the other portion of it too, which I didn't learn of until Celebration Day, the DVD, which was released in 2012, was JPJ playing the Hammond organ on the song, where he uses the bass pedals instead of the bass guitar, which was like
mind-numbingly odd to me. I thought as long as I've known this song that was just him and his bass sitting there delivering these absurdly deep,
very deep
notes where I was like, how on earth did they do this and how are they ever going to replicate it live? Okay, now it all makes sense. But I think mission accomplished. Like this would be you've painted a Picasso, you've built the house that no one understands how you built it into the side of that mountain. You did it. It was tough. It was hard. And then you get this result. I truly love a takeaway of what Joe Satriani said about this. I'm not sure if you've ever even heard about this. But
No, I have the same quote that you did, and I want you to take it away here because it's I think high praise from someone who is technically one of the best guitarists out there.
Yeah, and I'll back it up too with a less than enthusiastic take on the song as well. But Joe Satriani, he said, "Since I've Been Loving You is a perfect example of taking a blues structure but striking out on your own. They were breaking ground, not copying. I love that Page would always just go for it." And like that is an essence of Zeppelin 1, Zeppelin 2, Zeppelin 3. But like I said, without ruining what we were going to do and go track by track in sort of the prologue of this episode, is that they had songs on Zeppelin 1 and 2 that were just tried and true 12-bar blues. Let's throw our own spin on it and put our own lyrics over it. This, to me, is that moment where it's like something else entirely is happening here, and you can't deny it. Like the experience, the listen, the takeaway, and I actually noted here the solo itself, which I think is interesting that you bring up that was overdubbed, just kind of fits in seamlessly to what you hear and how the track kind of rolls. The less enthusiastic take on the song is from our good friend Lester Bangs of Rolling Stone magazine, who said this song represents the obligatory slow and lethally dull 7-minute blues jam, which we all know what Lester Bangs indulged in and how he went about it, and probably a bit of naysaying.
Though we will get to him later with another track on this album.
Well, we will, which is fair, because I also need to back this up with the fact that I enjoy that take, because I try my best to go with these albums as a first-time listener without knowing what's to come. And if I'm maneuvering my way through this album and I hit Since I've Been Loving You, it would strike me at a first listen like, holy cow, what did I just get put through? But I may also feel a little bit of like, here we go, usual Zeppelin. They build me up, and then they throw in a blues song that, I'm supposed to just deal with and love. I do love this one, though, is the problem. And it is done very thoughtfully and well. But I could see where, first time through, I would be so bloody hungry for what I just experienced through the first, bit of this side A that, it may come as a bit of a dull moment amongst others. And I'm not looking at historically, like, how is this going to resonate with me over time?
Sure.
It's in that moment. It's the same thing that we think about when we're listening to Dave albums. Like, hey, why, Dave? Why'd you throw this there? But then who knows how we're going to feel 15, 20 years from now when the band's gone and, we're revisiting these tracks and it's like, wait a minute, I can isolate and silo these tracks for what they are. But in essence of this album, I think it fits. I'm sort of not with Lester Bangs on this one. I also don't think that it's a lethally dull 7-minute blues jam. I never get that. And I've got a take on it too, personally, so I want to let you have the floor here,
Sure.
but I do.
Yeah, I mean, Lester Bangs, I'm surprised. Another word that I thought he would have used for it is masturbatory, and only that Robert is, he is full Robert Plant here, and Jimmy with that solo is full Jimmy. But the thing is, I view that as conviction. I view that as, yes, I know Robert started with, been working from 7 to 11, which was a line very similar to Moby Grape's Never, which was a slow blues song that inspired this. But Moby Grape could not touch the heights that Zeppelin could performance-wise. So when I look at Robert and Jimmy on this, and yes, John Paul and John Bonham are great, and what JPJ is doing, organ, bass pedals, super impressive. But the heart and soul of the song is in your two lead guys. It is a showcase for your vocalist and your lead guitarist. By the way, only the second, well, we can throw Tangerine in there, which has a little guitar solo. 3 guitar solos on the whole album. That's it. So Jimmy Page was not masturbatory as the band leader saying, I need a guitar solo every track. He saved it for this. It is, according to Terry Manning, the co-engineer, the best rock guitar solo of all time. Now, as we get to the end of this series, we'll do some fun things like favorite Jimmy Page solo. We'll think of different categories. I go to The Rover from Physical Graffiti as an underrated one. I talked about how tasty Celebration Day was across the board. But next to Stairway to Heaven, I would say of his epic guitar solos, this is right up there. And it's, Jesus, it's down, 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 like, and then he keeps going. He's dancing all over that fucking fretboard, man, like a maniac. But it's got feeling, and that's it, man. He's not Buckethead, only technical, no soul. You know what I mean by that? Jimmy Page, at his best, melded technical genius with soul, and this solo has that in spades, and it lifts this song into the stratosphere before the band so cannily says, da-na-na, boom. I said I've been crying. And then, boom, JPJ. Yeah, like, what the... Dude, just talking about it and thinking of how they're feeding off each other, it's brilliant, man. And I will let you know, no spoilers. I'm not going to say it's my spicy biscuit, but it was in the running.
I love that too. Tail end of that Joe Satriani quote of this song, he says, whatever he did would turn into a technique.
I like that.
So check this out. There's a movie, 1994, Christopher Lloyd. It's called Camp Nowhere. It's a big
oh, man.
There is a pretty pivotal scene in the movie where Mud, the main character who kind of coordinates the whole idea to go to this camp and have all their parents pay for what camps they thought they were supposed to be going to, hires a con artist in Christopher Lloyd, who he meets at a cheese shop in the mall, putting on a pretty good show, that he wants him to just kind of be the overseer of this, and they're going to go to this camp. He's going to pay him a sum of money, basically just to be kind of like the chaperone for the summer, but he would be hands off. And this specific scene takes place on a rainy day. So to all listeners out there, you know, the most lackluster, drowsy day of your summer was when you woke up and it's fucking pouring outside, and you realize that your parents are going to be annoyed at you. You're going to be annoyed because all you want to do is get outside and do what you do in the summer, and you can't. So they just perfectly formulate this scene in the movie. And they're going through this epilogue, sitting around this little cabin, and they're like, man, I could really go home right now. What I would use for this fast food, you know, and then one kid says Baywatch. They're like, Baywatch. You know, it's just things they're missing because they're away, right? They don't have it. So Mud takes off running through kind of the jungle, passes a few folks that are making out, and then runs into Christopher Lloyd's cabin where he's listening to Winston Churchill, and a pretty famous speech for Winston Churchill. And he says, who is this? What is going on? He's like, Winston Churchill. He's the Jimi Hendrix of speech. And he's like, who's Jimi Hendrix? And it's just it's a moment that I'll take away forever. But the thing about that is there's a kid that's there with them who's like this English kid, not English, he's American, but he has the electric guitar. He plays the cello, throws it into the fire in the beginning of the movie. And then when they order and use all their money on all this fun stuff, he orders electric guitar. And he is playing a solo through kind of this rain scene. And I swear, man, we wrap this episode up, I'm going to play this little clip for you from this episode. But the takeaway, literally, is this technique that comes from this fucking song. And I'm not joking with you. So, like, all the way back, it's this ridiculous 1994 Christopher Lloyd movie that would really turn into nothing. It's got some incredible people in it. Jessica Alba's in it. There's multiple people that are young and
ultimately become influential in it. But in the moment, you're listening to this, and I was grabbed because it was a rainy scene. There's a little bit of this solo going on over it. I'm like, what is this? Who is this? It's nobody. Literally, it's like it's an overdub track for a fucking movie. Like, but then you visit this song, and you're like, there's something all too familiar about this. And what do? I've got to correlate it with a moment in my life, familiar takeaway, and it's that, man. And like, I think it's just so interesting to piece the two together. And then you go back now and you listen to that moment in Camp Nowhere, and you're like, okay, so Joe Satriani was on something because he's talking about this technique, and somebody else found that technique and they utilized it, and it works. Then you revisit this song and you listen to it in totality. Like you're witnessing the moment that Van Gogh decided to take to the canvas. Like, they weren't looking to be this impactful in writing whatever this was. It was a track. It's a 7-minute track. I do think at some point during it, they realized how good it was coming along and what was happening. Hence the overdub of the solo, I would have to imagine, because I think there became a staple for how they knew this song would be perceived and how it would be delivered on this album. But man, I looking at so many tracks where I'm like, it's too short. This is one that fits right in there with like Dazed and Confused and some of the the first two albums that just works in the time frame, because you get to the end of this too, and I'm still kind of wanting some more. And it's one of those songs where if it was like playing in the background at Huber's, it could play for 4 hours. Would you care? No. I wouldn't. Like, I'd be like, okay. There'd be moments where I would stop what I'm doing and I would focus in and listen. And then there's other moments I would just be hamming it up, playing darts and hanging out with you guys. But if it were in the background the entire time, I'd be like, yeah, okay, sign me up. So it's just incredible, man. But from a cosmic takeaway from moment to moment, I think it was just so crazy to see Joe Satriani just kind of say, hey, whatever he did turned into a technique.
I think it's a brilliant line, and I think it's basically saying this guy was so influential that whatever it was, even if it was a little bit messy, we're going to call that technique. Like, in other words, when you are sort of establishing the foundation of what a hard rock guitarist could do, like Jimmy Page did more than maybe anybody in rock history, then, a Joe Satriani is a kid, a teenager in his room, he's playing this solo. So therefore, it is becoming his technique because he's just listening to his biggest influence. This song, a big part of Zeppelin's discography. You have it as a staple of live sets. It was even played in the 2007 Celebration Day show in London, and a pretty good version of it too, where Robert managed to get one high note. It's like he was saving it for that one moment in Since I've Been Loving You. Not to ruin it for you, Ben, you might have noticed this, you might have read about it. If you do listen close, Bonham's kick drum pedal could have used some WD-40. There is a persistent squeak throughout the entire track, and it rears its ugly head. But the thing is, like, I notice it. It doesn't ruin it for me. It's not one of those things that is so distracting where you can't enjoy the rest of the song, but it's there if you want to give it a little trial run next time you listen to it.
Look, well, I used to love this song. Not sure if I will after this.
The next time you listen to it, you will be annoyed. And then the second or third time after, it will just become part of the stew that is the brilliance of this thing. But yeah, Since I've Been Loving You. Now, can we move on to a song that I know riff-wise? Do you have anything more for Since I've Been Loving You?
Just one more point, and it's that, me, man, for most all of these songs, if it were impactful or had the power that this song had, for God's sakes, I typically had I know where I was at, or when I experienced that for the first time. This is one of those songs where I could not pinpoint the first time I've heard it. In fact, it's just one of those things, like a really good friend. You can't remember like where, when, or how you met them. It's just been around forever.
Yeah.
I couldn't pinpoint that, dude. Like, I don't know the first time that I heard it, because I think the way that the song starts and flows, it doesn't grab you right off the bat. And when it finally does, you're like in it. And, it's just interesting. I noted that because I was like, I can't pinpoint it, man. And yet definitely up there. I'm not going to say in terms of my spiciest Biscuit ranking, but this song overall is one where if I had to, I'll use the analogy again, pinpoint a song for Zeppelin to my wife, this might be one that I would say, Emily, sit down really quick. Let me just play this one for you, and then we're going to get to others. But this might be the tipping point for like, let's dive into some Zeppelin and let me put this on for you really quickly, because I think it highlights everybody. But it would be impossible for her not to have an experience getting start to finish through this song and then not maybe look at me and be like, okay, what else do they got? Right. So I don't know, man. I just couldn't pinpoint the first time I heard it or where I was or what I was doing. It's just always existed. So yeah, next track.
All right, we are moving on to a personal favorite, I think, for both you and I. So Out on the Tiles, which is a riff to end all riffs and performed with such a groove by this band. Now, originally titled Bathroom Sound because of the drum reverb. So when you listen to the not B-side, but the second bonus disc of the reissue that came out in 2015, they have the instrumental mix of this that Jimmy throws on there called Bathroom Sound. So you just hear the three of them playing together. It's really fun to listen to without the vocals, which I love the vocal take on it. Now, this was derived from a John Bonham ditty about going to the pub. And I have the words here, and I'm going to try to transpose it to what I think inspired the riff. So it's, I would imagine, I'm out on the tiles. I've had a pint of bitter, and now I'm feeling better because I'm out on the tiles. I think is what it was, okay, if I were to guess what the melody was. So Jimmy works that into a riff. The three of them are just kind of messing around with it, and Robert writes these lyrics that I don't know what the lyrics to Out on the Tiles mean. To me, it's just like, all right, I'm out, I'm moving around. The lyrics encapsulate to me swagger. Maybe because the riff has swagger, but Robert sings it with such conviction, even though I don't think the lyrics mean a damn thing, that I'm like, dude, Robert, you can sing whatever you want to. Nothing more than I can say, but on a day like today, like, I don't know. I don't know what the lyrics mean, but let alone the chorus is this poppy, all I need from you is all your love. He doesn't say out on the tiles, but he doesn't have to. So Lester Bangs of Rolling Stone, hot and cold on Zeppelin, admittedly, describes Celebration Day and Out on the Tiles as, quote, production line Zepp churners that no fan could fault and no one else could even hear without an effort. I don't know if that's a backhanded compliment at the end, but when he says production line Zepp churner, I don't disagree. It's Zeppelin at their riffiest best, but it is an incredible riff. It is so good.
And I think it, at the end of the day, is maybe the epitome of what I complain about, which are songs that are too short and they give you a little bit and don't fully deliver on what it is. And maybe that's the beauty behind it, that it just leaves you constantly wanting more, so you always have to restart the track. But, man, if this went, another chorus and verse, like just to stretch it a couple more minutes, I would be the happiest camper of all time, because the outro is incredible, man, and it's just so short, and it's like the epitome of what they're able to do from a riff perspective. And maybe they were looking at it as just like this is a pub song and this is what it is, right? So like maybe folks were close to and this side of the world would look at this understandably as what it is, not knowing that like one day this will be categorized as like its own singular track. People aren't going to understand that. It would be like us like singing like a fight song for Illini or Louisville or something, and we just add it to a record. Like if if it's like a common theme of what you would do in a pub, it maybe makes sense that it's like a smaller, shorter little ditty. But goddamn, dude, it's just so powerful. And then you know the takeaways, like what the Black Crowes have done with it. You know how heavy-handed this can be from a live perspective, and you're like, okay, so I'm always going to want more of it. And it is perfection. I mean, it literally is rock perfection. I have to give it its flowers for what it is. It's a lot of people's favorite tracks too, man. I mean, and not just Jimmy, not just Robert and the way they deliver the chorus. Like, people put this up there with some of Bonzo's best too.
Yeah, I think that it was a showcase for him, even though we don't really hear it on the studio version as much. But it replaced, I should say, the intro of Moby Dick to his drum solo beginning in 1977. So the three instrumental guys would play a full verse and chorus of Out on the Tiles before John Bonham would go into his solo. The opening riff, what a bend on that G to A. That was used as a Black Dog intro because that would give Robert before the vocal, oh, that's the A. Okay, great. Because Black Dog is a song based in A. Out on the Tiles ends that opening riff in A. So it was played in some variation with Zeppelin essentially from when it started. And there are early versions. You can find it on YouTube. They did play it fully as a band a few times in 1970 and 71. And it's pretty good. Now, I would imagine incredibly taxing for Robert because he is just up there on this whole song. And it is just another example of Robert being at his peak vocal prowess. And I would agree. You talked about the intro. I will, when I get into, playing the drums mode, I just play for fun along to Zeppelin stuff. And I have to put a soundproofing headphones on top of my earbuds. And I'll play that outro to Out on the Tiles, and it fades out, and I'm like, man, I could have went another 2 minutes. I'm just grooving with it, man. And I think it is the tasteful fade out that was needed in side A. But could I have taken a 6-minute version of this? 100%. It would not have been overly repetitive. In fact, I think the repetitive nature of this outro is what makes it work.
Yeah, and spot on for sure. I also think that, the chorus, all I need from you is all your love. Like when that hits, it's almost like you were given a right hook, a right hook, a right hook, and then a left hook. Like it is not the flow that you would expect to hear, right? First time listener, like you're going into it. It's refreshing, but it's just different. It's swimming downstream and all of a sudden you're swimming back upstream with the way that Robert delivers those lyrics.
You know what just occurred to me, Ben, is that this and Celebration Day have happy choruses.
Happy. That's where I'm going with it. It's like they could have taken a completely different direction. And maybe that's the instance that I'm thinking they're going. It's like this is going to be a dramatic Robert and a dramatic drop into where they're heading in the chorus. And all of a sudden they surprise you with this summer feel good chorus, man. Like windows down and you're belting it. So it's just interesting, And again, like easy to in hindsight take away now and look at, but I'm just thinking from the first time, it's like, wow, like it's best way I describe it is just like a swift left hook because it's not something you're expecting.
Talk about not expecting something. Side A ends. 3 rock songs, a blues song, 1 acoustic song. That in and of itself is not unusual for Led Zeppelin. So we get to side B. You flip it over. Wow, I really like that. And there's this little... Okay, simple little acoustic intro. Robert comes in, pretty low register. Hangman. Okay. If you were to take your record needle for the start of side B and listen to 30 seconds of Gallows Pole and just move it 3 minutes ahead, you would be like, how in the hell did this song get from an acoustic guitar and vocal to acoustic 12, acoustic 6, electric, mandolin, banjo, bass, drums, vocal, freak out? Gallows Pole opens side B. This is a traditional song best known from Leadbelly's version, Gallows Pole, inspired by Fred Gerlach's version. The more commonly known version that Jimmy was inspired by was Made Freed from the Gallows. And as I mentioned, 6-string acoustic, 12-string acoustic, banjo, electric by Jimmy, JPJ laying down the mandolin and the bass. This is one of Jimmy Page's favorite Led Zeppelin songs. It was played on both Jimmy Page and Robert Plant tours, and a few times by the band, though of course they could not on stage capture the just crazy instrumentation on the studio cut. So I have always had a soft spot for Gallows Pole. And I noticed when I listened to it on my runs this week This shit gets going, dude. Oh. When the drums kick in, I kick another gear on my run. It gives me an energy. I think this album is just a lot of fun. It's a fun album, and there's a joy to it. And this song, despite being about hanging from the gallows, is actually a joyful song. I really, really love this tune.
I agree. It's always had a darker side of things for me, just I think based on judging a book by its cover in the name. It's hard to break past that. But in terms of what it does for me, like I'll use the setting that I was in the most formidable of this re-listen, which wasn't in the car, it was mowing the lawn. And this is one of those like pause moments where I found myself like, hold on, I need to stop right now, shut the mower off, and like, give this moment time, because it's doing something to me that, I don't just experience on the casual listen when this song comes on. It also just seems so relative. It's like, again, it's Zeppelin at its finest. It's listening to what they have to offer, and then it's not surprising, but then if you like slow down, like you got to slow down, take it for what it is. I agree with you, it's joyous. But the chord progressions in the verse, what is it, D and G? Is that right?
The chord progression is A major to A minor, which gives it a really kind of, is it happy? Is it sad? And then the chorus, hangman. So A, G, D, G, A, G, D, D, A, G, D, G, G, D, G, A, G, A, G, A, G, A. 3 chords in the entire song. No bridge, nothing like that.
Yep. Yeah. I'm with you though, man. I find myself getting into like a
trance,
a great spirit. I was thinking kind of just like a hoedown. Like you're just at like a party and you're like, oh man, like everybody's like, next thing you know, you look around and everybody's into it.
Can you imagine if John Bonham had been blowing into a big brown jug? It would have fit. It would have fit this song.
Yeah, it's very much that. But yeah, man, I love it. It's up there. It's up there with those. I think it does, however, fit kind of in that that similar instance of Celebration Day for me, in way of the naming credential for it helps. It puts it in a unique place because of, if you're going through the track listing without listening to any of this album, I'd be like, what is that? Kind of like No Quarter. It's like Gallows Pole. That sounds ominous and dark, and I got to check that one out. But it sort of fits in the same mold as Celebration Day for me, where this wouldn't be one that I would say like, hey, I'm going to write you 5 Zeppelin tracks I need you to listen to. This would be like down the road. As I know now, you've proven to me that you're on this journey and you're down to listen to some tracks, and you've come back to me with some accolades and takeaways of what I've given you in the first 5. I might move on to some more, and I don't even know if this would be yet then in that second 5 list. This might be like 15 or 20, and I'm not talking about overall song rankings. I'm just talking about reception. Like, how would this be received from somebody that's never listened to Zeppelin before? I'm trying to get them, on a stride for what it means and kind of what they should focus in on. And I'm saying that sort of from personal experience, because I love it, but it's sort of like an IPA or something. Like, it's probably not something that you'll enjoy right the first time you listen to, but then you listen to it again, and then you listen to what's surrounding it. That eventually you'll be like, why did I never like this? And nope, you're lying. There's never a point in time where I didn't like Gallows Pole. Not saying that I never liked it. It's just, it was a unique taste for where we were at with this album, especially the fact that it was kicking off side B, which is like the whole other portion of it.
It is the perfect bridge to side B as well. And actually, I think the perfect encapsulation of this album, because if this is the so-called acoustic album, which of course it is heavily acoustic compared to the previous 2, this is the acoustic electric intermediary. It has a little bit of both, and it will lead nicely into the rest of side B, which is basically all acoustic except for one electric guitar solo on Tangerine. But by the end of this thing, Jimmy's busting out the electric with some tasty licks. I think that, to me, this is a traditional song that they say arranged by Page and Plant. This features all 4 band members at their absolute peak. I think about Robert's vocal histrionics, if you want to call it the end of it, with a I'm not doing very well. My voice is not very good right now, but no. Like he's just doing this sort of like call and response thing with himself and also with Jimmy's electric guitar that's overdubbed there. And it's so funny how these songs, when you listen to them enough, all these vocal improvisational things that he's doing become as essential to the song as the lyrics themselves. So if I'm listening to this in my car, I'm doing what Robert's doing during the outro. I think that this is a phenomenal vocal by him because he starts low and he builds and he's really kind of driving this song through the storytelling. And I just imagine if I'm like Andy Johns during the recording of this and I see Jimmy adding layer after layer, this is a eureka moment for me. It's like, I get it. I see this mastermind putting this thing together from a very bare bones. You can listen to the rhythm track, by the way, acoustic bass drums. They have the rhythm track on disc 2 of the reissue in 2015, and it's great, but it is the embryo. It's how Jimmy layers all the other stuff on top of it and Robert's vocal that really just take this to a completely different level.
Yeah, and I think the way the song starts with the, I guess the chest approach, if you will, the hangman, hold it a little while. What I love about that is he's also, in my opinion, sort of call and response with the guitar, because the hold it a little while, it's like almost like a twang in and of itself, where he's following the pick movements. Like it's exactly what he's doing, which I think is like brilliance, because what came first? Like, this is the chicken or the egg. It's like, did the ditty come, or was it the lyrics and then Jimmy followed in suit? Who knows?
You know what I like about that, Ben, is that I would assume, given the collaborative nature between the two on this album, that was not how it was played at first. So I just like the fact that this was hey, I like this song. And then they start strumming, and then they start realizing intuitively between themselves. Robert's saying, well, that's how Jimmy's doing. Like, because here's the guitar thing. There's a cool little lilt to it, and Robert is matching that with his vocal. So I would love to kind of hear early demos or the little tape recorder that they took with them on their hikes and see how it morphed into that.
Yeah, and then obviously gets into the head voice of, the great Robert Plant and what he does, and the rest is history here. But poetic, just spontaneous too, man. This is just its own. It's a standalone track, which like I don't think we probably talk about enough. If you silo these down, as amazing as these albums are as a whole, you start to do greatest hits, thoughts, and takeaways of what these will ultimately mean to you, and what you visit when you come back, and what you completely glaze over. And like I said, it's an acquired taste to me, but when you do let this song in, it's so unique in its own right that like it isn't an Immigrant Song. It's not A Whole Lot of Love. This is not A Dazed Confused. This is Gallows Pole, and it's like standalone completely in so many different facets, including the fact that it's a different collaboration for what Robert and Jimmy usually do in other songs, where it's almost like they are going different directions than it works. This is one where they're like maybe in the car together and going down the same highway at the same time, which then you're thinking like, oh, like what is this? So it works. Yeah.
It's awesome. I really love this song. Now, this side B, it is the acoustic side. I liked it from a young age. It was never controversial for me. We go into track 7 on the album and track 2 on side B. Tangerine. This is a Jimmy Page composition. He is the sole credit on this song from the Yardbirds days. So it was a couple years old when he brought it to the band. There is another false start, similar to Friends. You can hear a hushed count in. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Okay, great. Simple acoustic intro. This is a really pretty song. There's not much to it in terms of complexity. It is a very straightforward verse and a chorus. There's a kind of dark bridge with a guitar solo, but it is Robert Plant, the crooner. And I think that it's a really cool approach because he doesn't do a single bit of high-end vocals. He serves the song, which is essentially kind of a country ballad. And I think it's a band kind of having some fun with genre. They're saying, listen, we could do another, balls to the wall rocker, but you know what? Let's try a country song where Jimmy can bring out the pedal steel, and John Bonham and John Paul Jones aren't doing anything fantastic, just tasteful rhythmic playing, and Robert keeps everything kind of close to the best. This is something that could have been on a Porter Wagoner album back in the 60s. Zeppelin does this country tune, essentially country tune, a great service by playing a very, I think, restrained kind of manner. And it serves the song. And, I mean, how can you not enjoy Tangerine? I don't know about if it's a classic in the ranks of their best, but it's just a really cute song. And I mentioned last week, what if this would have been, instead of Thank You, the side A closer? Or what if That's the Way, which we're going to get to, would have been the side A closer on Led Zeppelin II? How much better is that side? This is a really cool... I enjoy this song. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I love it. This is one, Uncharacteristics, Celebration Day, or Gallows Pole, that I would probably put up there in like the first 5 or 10 tracks that I would feed to somebody.
Fair.
Trying to get a sense of what Led Zeppelin is and what they're capable of. This takes me to a place of like, I don't know, you sit down at a coffee shop to kick work off on a, slower day, and you kind of want to be out people watching, but you also want to be getting work done. This is going to be up there with one of the first tracks that I kick off to kind of ease into my day. It's also one that I could throw on at 5:30 driving home through traffic and, get a second win for the day before I get home to the family and, put the dad hat on. Like, it works in so many different avenues for what I look at it as. And it's also just like angelic and serene in its delivery. And without knowing, the takeaways of this being a pre-existing song of Jimmy's and so forth. I mean, it also just like adds a relevance to the format of this album, I think, because of the way that Robert delivers what ultimately the lyrics are and how that just works. We kind of mentioned this during Zeppelin II, and I can't recall the exact moment that you said that Tangerine could have been introduced on that album, almost as like a missing link kind of thing. But I think that if this were missing from side B of this album, that it could have been disastrous. I sort of like tiptoe on that statement because who knows, like what would have been put in its place, but like it adds a lot to the longevity of side B, if you will, because it's, again, like I said, one of the first songs that you would toss out to a new fan or somebody that they need to listen to. And then if you do deep dive, you're like, where does this stand on Zeppelin's albums and where is it? Right. I mean, it's side B of Zeppelin III, like, and here's the other tracks that it's accompanied by.
Yeah, I think you hit a good point though. If you were to introduce this, like you show this to your wife, or I'm on a road trip with my wife, and I know that they're going to enjoy this song. It's an objectively enjoyable song, and I think that it's interesting that Jimmy kind of shelved it until now, but I think he shelved it for the perfect album that it would fit on and the perfect side. And I think the track placement works really well. It's a bit of a breath after what is a really frenetic end to Gallows Pole and a long fade out. And then you have this ballad. And then they're going to turn it up, right? No, they are not going to turn it up, Ben. Instead, they're going to literally put on the most beautiful song they ever produced in their career. And that's saying something. That's the Way. I've never shed a tear to That's the Way, and I don't know what that says about me as a person, because it is beautiful. And Lester Bangs, I'll start with his quote if that's okay, because I think you probably got the same note I did. From his Rolling Stone review in 1970, Lester Bangs said, quote, "Finally, I must mention a song called That's the Way, because it's the first song they've ever done that has truly moved me. Son of a gun, it's beautiful." Lester Bangs, a notoriously difficult guy to get on your side. This song, I understand why it resonated, because it is a song that has this intangible quality. It has a vibe and a feel that they conjure up that goes beyond the words and the lyrics and goes beyond the chords that are being played. It is, you use the word angelic for Tangerine. This, to me, is otherworldly. It is a band at their peak that was able to, in a moment of inspiration, put together this. It's remarkable. It's so good.
Lock the gates. Lock the gates. No, man, I'm with you. Like, it is so difficult for me not to equate some of the best songs in history to the moments they were played in a movie. Like, because to me, there's the cosmic essence of the song and then being placed perfectly over a scene that may or may not mean something. In this case, hugely meaningful and sort of in a playful way. What I'm referring to is Almost Famous, and it's a fairly pivotal scene in the movie where Russell gets electrocuted at a gig. They decide to pull the plug and leave, and this is sort of the introduction of Mark Maron's character in the movie, where he's screaming at the band to get back on stage and to finally lock the gates, which is the intro to his podcast, as the band is screaming up the tunnel in their tour bus, where their manager says, "Do you feel like buying a gate?" And they say, "Hell yeah." And then Mark Maron delivers, "You just bought a gate." That whole scene, as it's building up from that moment where they enter the tour bus, That's the Way is sort of playing subtly in the background. And then it is a montage of Penny Lane sort of gallivanting around the tour bus as the band mates are doing their own thing. Some just tried and true, commenting on the high school runners that are outside the bus. And Russell is just having this epiphany moment where he's like, "You guys do you, man. I'm good," you know. But they're yelling at him, "Russell, man, wake up," because it's clearly something he usually is like risen to. But to me, it's the song. Like, it's not playing in his head. It's not even playing over the tour bus's speakers. It's the soundtrack of the movie in the moment. But it's perfectly placed because, I don't know, for anybody that's listened to that song and has had an impact on it, it does put you in that melancholy, epiphany-like moment where you're like reflecting, you're thinking about other things. It takes you to a place. Angelic, yeah. I mean, Tangerine to me, also angelic, but this is like its own standalone version of that. And I just love the way that it's delivered in Almost Famous. Like, it is long enough. It's placed over a fairly long scene, start to finish, that ends with Jeff Beebe, the lead singer of the band, coming out of the restroom of the gas station they stopped at for snacks, and he delivers the famous line where he's like, "It's cool, man. You can forget about me. I'm only the fucking lead singer," as he like runs after the bus. And so to me, that moment, that song, that placement in the movie, and what you gather from sort of the essence of the song is why I love it. Because I truly think that probably the first time that I gave it enough space to listen to it in that capacity was in that moment of Almost Famous. Do you remember for you, Mike, like the first time that you experienced that? Like,
I mean, I think this song, listening to it really on cassette, because we had the record, but that was early days where we'd listen to Immigrant Song and then we'd take it off pretty much. So that was the introduction to Led Zeppelin at a very young age, but I bought this cassette from Target at 8 or 9, and knowing Immigrant Song, I knew, like, well, I have a gateway to it, but then I had to discover the rest of it, and I liked the weirdness of side A, And then side B, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I like them as an acoustic band. And it gets to That's the Way, and I do remember driving in my dad's 94 white Ford Explorer. He got it from work, and it was the first SUV we ever had. SUVs are pretty cool back then. Like, this is a big deal. And the cassette deck allowed you to seek forward to songs. It would find the gaps in between them. So if you wanted to seek forward to track 3, fine, seek, now you're track 2. Seek once more, now you're track 3. And we would do that with That's the Way. And then on Led Zeppelin IV, we would do that with Going to California, which are both in a similar vein of very spare acoustic songs that are beautiful and unapologetically so. They both have longing, but while Going to California has a more adult romantic longing, That's the Way you use the word melancholic, and it is melancholic. To me, it's, as a song, the oral version of it's okay to be sad. It's okay for things to pass. That's the way it's got to be, or that's the way it's going to be. And it's like a version of it is what it is. What are you going to do? It's fine. I think there's such a reassurance, and it is the warmest blanket of a song that I can think of. Maybe not just with Zeppelin, but of any band. And again, we've already had conversations where right now, when we predict what our spicy biscuits are, I don't know what our predictions are going to be because we've lavished praise on so many of these songs, but I think we've been very careful to do that for songs worthy of it. Yep. And this is a song that is a lot of songwriters would kill to write one song like this. And I don't think it wasn't a throwaway for Zeppelin, not by any stretch, because they loved this song. They played it for most of their career. But I just love the fact of this band that could do like cock rock, strut, swagger stuff like Whole Lotta Love and Immigrant Song, can just as quickly do this.
Yeah.
And it's earnest, and it doesn't fall flat. It feels real and genuine. I believe every word Robert's saying in this and every strum on Jimmy's guitar.
Yeah, and I'm going to want to take a snippet of this pod and introduce it into Zeppelin IV when we do review Going to California, because what you said there is going to really resonate with the visual takeaway of a certain show that I know you and I love, and a moment of when that song was introduced where basically what you described is perfect for what is to come with that song as well. But I agree, man, like this is a warm blanket. It's a familiar place that you didn't know you needed. And something that, like, for this part of the album, it's like, what? Like, I mean, kind of out of left field, as most things are with what we've visited through 1, 2, and now 3. But like, this could have been the track for almost any artist out there of like historically. And it's just kind of like intricately placed here on side B of Led Zeppelin III. It's like, God, like, what was the thought process behind that? How do they actually feel about this song? What was their perspective on it before it was released? Because I think this was one that was like, and we'll see how this goes with fans or how they feel about it. Maybe they were sort of on the opposition. Like, how many slower, melancholic songs can we release, before they start calling us sappy and poetic? But to me, this album, in lump sum, which we'll get to, if I had to like just blanket statement, I'd say poetic. Like, it's the first poetic album that they would have released, in my opinion.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And this song to me is that exclamation point where it's like, you want poetry, you want to walk away feeling like you just experienced something, like walking into a Bob Ross painting, like this is it right here. Like you're in it.
The word that comes to mind with this song is evocative, because it's not as if the lyrics, there's a literalism that you could take the lyrics with, but what the lyrics from Robert really do is they evoke a feeling. You may not have ever had a boy next door that mama said you can't play with him anymore. It's just the sense, the emotion that is conveyed through those very simple words. It was originally titled The Boy Next Door. Of course, they went with the better title of That's the Way. This was, I think, the fact that this was written, Ben, after a long day of hiking. So they're Bron-Y-Aur, however you pronounce it, Long day of hiking. Jimmy and Robert, they sit down on the ravine next to the cottage. They brought out the tape recorder, and this came together. Even that right there speaks to an authenticity, an organic nature of the song being constructed that really takes away any fear that this was contrived balladry. It wasn't. This was two guys, a partnership growing, and there's a spontaneous kind of inspiration, which, I mean, every musician strives for. Songs come out of the ether, as Keith Richards often says. This, to me, came out of the ether for these guys in the exact environment and the only environment that it could have come out in. So if there was only one song that came from the Bron-Y-Aur sessions, and it was That's the Way, it was a fruitful trip for Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, because this is just such a leap. I don't want to shit on Thank You from Led Zeppelin II, but think about the leap in songwriting from Thank You, which is a band trying to write a ballad,
100%.
to this.
Yeah, and I've got a massive sweet spot in my heart for this song too, because
You sound like you choked up there for a second, but I think you just had something in your throat.
well, no, I did, man. Didn't expect that, but no, listeners would never know this, but live next door to a very good friend of ours, and he has a to-be 4-year-old son here pretty soon in June, who is a month older than my daughter Collins, and it's sort of the dream, right? Like live right next door to your best friends, and let your children grow up together. My daughter is Collins, his son is Maddox, and we've joked for a long time, long before they were even thought of or a glisten in their daddy's eyes, folks say, that we would preordain them if we were to have boy and girl or girl and boy, whatever the opposition may be, or boy and boy or girl and girl. It really didn't matter at that point. We were going to Game of Thrones the shit out of this and say that they have zero choice in the matter, and as time goes on, they're eventually going to be husband and wife, wife and wife. It didn't matter that one day we would be speaking at their wedding talking about the longevity of their life. So when I was revisiting this album and going through the track listing and then revisiting lyrics, I was like, no way. Like, to kick it off with saying, I don't know how I'm going to tell you, I can't play with you no more. I don't know how I'm going to do what Mama told me, my friend, the boy next door, all the way down to the end of the song. And it's just, there's a moment where it goes, and so I say to you that nothing really matter, and all you do is stand and cry. It's like, holy shit. Like, I mean, they're speaking to just moments for people, and it's captured in this very angelic, very melancholic rhythm that they're putting together from a sonic perspective, but then it's also met with the lyrics. So, like, yes, thank you, absolutely, but it was a moment where I feel like the music was put together and the lyrics came after the fact to kind of say, like, we need to put something over this. It's a song. We got to have lyrics to it. I, again, don't know which came first here. Like, was Robert out in the midst of just the woods and, like you said, coming back from a hike and jotted this shit down?
I think so, yeah.
And the music came behind it, or which is just where it takes you. But it definitely just is like, it dawned on me, that I could print this out and just like put this on Collins' wall. It would eventually make sense in some capacity. So just super cool, man. And sort of the moment of the album when, I don't know, it's like if I had my way about it and I was in the Bron-Y-Aur cabin, I might say that's good, guys, but we'll get there. So a couple more tracks here to go.
For time's sake, because we got some other stuff to do, let's bunch these next two together, okay? Because we have a 1 through 8, boom, 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 just like Murderer's Row, right? Now, Bron-Y-Aur Stomp comes next. I love Bron-Y-Aur Stomp. It's a romp. It's fun. They played it live acoustically quite a bit. It was a fan favorite. It is written to his dog Strider. It's a fun throwaway tune that I still listen to, and I enjoy it. Like, I sing along with it, and I always have loved the breakdown where it's just the kick drum. is going poonch, poonch, and then Jimmy's going doodle-na-na-na-noo, doodle-na-na-na-noo, doodle-na-na-na-doo, doom, doom, doom. It's the only acoustic break, instrumental break, and then Robert comes in with my, load, come on now, it ain't too far. Tell your friends all around the world, there ain't no companion like a blue-eyed Merle. They're taking the piss. There's humor to it. It's about a dog, but it's a fun song that I think, it captures that attitude that they're really trying to get on this album. It's It's the titular song of where they wrote most of these tunes at, even though they misspelled it, by the way, Ben. Keep in mind, Bron-Y-Aur, as it should be spelled, is BRON-YR-AUR. Well, they forgot the R after the Y in the spelling, hence the mistake. But can we just say this with one fell swoop? This is a weird 9-10 ending to the album.
Yeah, it's a hoedown. It's a hoedown after That's the Way, which is, I mean,
devastatingly good.
on the Mount Rushmore of Zeppelin songs. So
Yeah.
you're like, okay, you're there, and then we go this direction, which I don't want to take away from it, man. I mean, for all intensive purposes, it stands the test of time and its purpose for what it is, but also for the first time after Zeppelin 1 and 2, I would be coming off of That's the Way, listening to the vinyl for the first time after spending probably $5 at this point on it, because they have realized their worth, and that album's going to be a little bit more expensive than the usual $3 to $4 note. And then you're met with tracks 9 and 10 of this, and I think it would be familiar how I typically feel about Dave Matthews, which would be like, what the fuck did you? And I would revisit it, and eventually I would take it for what it is, and I would enjoy it because it's still a song by the band that you love. But in essence of what the album is and where it was and heading to where it ends up would be a head scratcher, probably to say the least at the moment. I would maybe I'd have some strong words and opinions on it in the moment, I think. So.
I think that's fair. I think if you were to chart this album, imagine that you go left to right on a line graph and you have a 1 to 10 ranking in terms of where you value that song. And I think a lot of people, visually, you look at tracks 9 and 10 and they would tail off pretty dramatically. But let's get to the closing track, Hats Off to Roy Harper, which I would imagine, and we don't need to reveal it yet, that both of us will put this as our Dustiest Crumpet. It is not a song held in high regard by many Zeppelin fans because it sounds so throwaway. However, we're going to talk about an alternative album closer. I think this works as a closer for this album and only this album. I think it is a middle finger. It's just Jimmy saying, here's some weird shit. Man, whatever. Put that on track 10. And make it so challenging for the listener. If they've come this far through 9 tracks, see if they can't make it one more. The most audacious thing we've done yet that isn't even pleasant to listen to, because Hats Off to Roy Harper is not pleasant to listen to. It's funky. It's kind of cool in its own way, but it took me years to really give it its due, despite loving the rest of the album. I think I just appreciate the boldness by choosing this to end what is a now classic album, but I also recognize that something like this would have turned people off at the time to say, what the hell, man? Bring it on home into Led Zeppelin 2, and how many more times into Led Zeppelin 1, and you're giving us this throwaway, bad-sounding, essentially, song.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, I mean, did you get through this the first time you tried listening to it?
I couldn't tell you the first time that I actually listened to it. The funny thing is I think the name grabbed me long before the track probably ever did. Like, I sort of enjoy what they did there. And then you get curious about it. You're like, it's clearly a shout out to somebody without knowing at the time, any background on the song or where it came from. But probably at least expecting product following that you would get, especially whenever you would look at the track listing, look at the album and be like, Well, they're starting out with Immigrant Song. No idea what's going to be sandwiched in between, but I would assume they're going to close out with something, I mean, again, to reiterate, like, if let's just think about the world where Immigrant Song starts Zeppelin III and that's the way it closes it. Like, what are you going to do? With all that's in between. I sort of look at this track and no ill will, man. Like you said, it took some time, and hearing your perspective on it, I actually enjoy, because it's like maybe they were beholden to a number of tracks that they had to put on this album. I don't know. Like, you never know at that point of what they were under in terms of the record company, or, did it have to be a certain length? Maybe they were just tossing on, a couple. On the flip side, it could become enjoyable and could become an acquired taste, like Gallows Pole was for me, where right off the bat it wasn't necessarily gravitating, and then I ultimately ended up enjoying it because I took it for what it was, and I wasn't, blowing it up any further. On the flip side, that said, I also could take it as a Dave Matthews track. It's like I always think about, like, there's a 28-second track.
That's shit.
From Tomorrow that is literally titled BKDKDKDD, and it's like, man, would I have been better if you all would have just kept that wherever it was, whether it was a warm-up or a tribute or a throwaway song as referred, where it was, and maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, it came out as a unreleased, studio nugget that we get and get to laugh about or enjoy because it's a piece of the band that you didn't usually get. I just don't look at this as a track that needed to be there, specifically coming off of That's the Way.
It didn't have to be. And the question I posed to you, so, I mean, Hey, What Can I Do is the B-side to Immigrant Song, and has over time become kind of a Zeppelin classic. I mean, it's one that was placed in the box set in the early 90s, and then it's been on a couple of compilations since. And it's just such a great acoustic song. And my question would be, would you replace that with Hats Off to Roy Harper? Or basically exchange them? And would it make side B even stronger? But the thing is, you would have to do some shuffling in the order, because I don't think you could end this album with Hey, What Can I Do? I don't think tonally it quite fits with the weirdness, because it's just such a fun pop song, essentially. But that wasn't the only one. They had some other songs, Poor Tom, which came out on Coda, which I really like. And then, Ben, you know what they could have done? Bron-Y-Aur, just Jimmy Page's solo that's on Physical Graffiti. It's 2 minutes long. Could have come after Bron-Y-Aur Stomp and ended the album in a very kind of ethereal, atmospheric, acoustic way. And then you just flip the side over and you're back to Immigrant Song. But they chose this. So I think it's so weird that it had to be deliberate. And I'll give Hats Off to Roy Harper this. The opening, whoop, 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 like just the weird, like, what the fuck was that? I remember listening to it like, what harsh sound was that? It's unnerving, it's harsh, it's not pleasant, it's by design. And I understand that people hate it. I don't ever choose to listen to it. But for a statement, an artistic statement, pretentious as that sounds, hey, okay, fine. I get it, I suppose.
You get into devil's advocate territory where you start to overanalyze what could be, what could have been added there to maybe make more sense. And I think if you do something like, hey, sorry, I'm having.
Hey, what can I do?
Yeah, like it's gonna be. You would have to shuffle around, and it may completely disorient what the album actually is. Yes. So for me, if there was just a clear-cut answer, it's we end this thing at That's the Way, and it sort of leaves people like, I wasn't necessarily thinking that I was going to go there mentally, and I'm left with flipping it right back over, and then you're pounded with Immigrant Song, and then you go through the roller coaster again. I also think this is, to be fair, probably the essence of our conversations most times with just sporadic set list games where you have a band, again, not to bring them up constantly, but Dave Matthews Band, My Morning Jacket, the Arctic Monkeys, bands who navigate and change their set list nightly, right? And you don't know what you're going to get going into a show, and then it can be just as easily critical on the back end when you finish a show and you're like, why the hell did they put that at the set closer? I didn't want to hear that in the encore. Like, dude, I'm paying money to come see you on a Saturday night in the middle of the summer. What did you do? But here's the thing. They're not thinking about it that way. Like, I think they're thinking about fan reception, but at the same time, they're thinking about what something means to them and that they want to get it on the album. And like, I look at certain tracks, Mike, that you and I put together with our boys, Matt, Kenton, Azar, Chris Brady. There was stuff that we did back in the day that we felt great about playing, and we didn't care how it was going to be received.
That's true.
Like, we enjoyed playing it. So maybe the boys just enjoyed this shit and they wanted to throw on the album, and it is what it is. And now it's easy to pick apart because of the amazingness that came before it. So I contradictory to the way that I described these last two tracks, it's easy for me also to still go through them and still listen to them because it's just a part of what the album actually is. And, there's no alternative, which is usually the case when it comes to a band that's sort of unleashing their artistic ability on the masses, which I also love, man. It lets you know that you can not like some things that they do and be okay with it. Like, you can critique them and you don't need to like everything that they do, but they're going to put it out there anyway. So I think you summed it up perfectly by saying maybe it's just a big middle finger from Jimmy. Yeah. And
I can do this, so I'm going to.
They love it. Exactly. So.
All right, so I want to breeze through reception real quick just so we can get to the ratings. We're already 2 hour, 40 minutes into this. Good God. But, an album worthy of this time. Now, reception was mixed at the time. I will start with something positive, though, from Robert Christgau, the dean of rock critics. He is very minimalist in his writing. He gave it an A- rating and said, I have always approved theoretically of Led Zepp's concept, and now the group has finally whipped it into shape. It's amazing to realize that Robert Plant's vocals can convey that same overbearing power when Page plays acoustic, as he does to great effect on several cuts here. No drum solos either. Heavy. So he was a fan. Lester Bangs liked some of it, didn't love other parts of it, but I would say overall, like, he would have given it a B- or something, which is an improvement for Rolling Stone. And the lukewarm response, though, at the time kind of pissed off Jimmy. He did not give an interview for another 18 months. It inspired the nameless fourth album, which was another middle finger from Jimmy to the general public, or really more to the rock intelligentsia. Some fans were perplexed by the acoustic or mostly acoustic side B. To date, 6 million records sold for Led Zeppelin III, so it's still one of their upper echelon selling albums. It was number 3 the week of release, number 1 by its second, but it didn't quite have the staying power of Led Zeppelin II after Immigrant Song kind of went off the charts, and the acoustic thing was not for everybody. Critical reappraisal, though, over the years, Ben, has really put 3 firmly among the band's best. Even if you go to Apple Music, which is not necessarily the end-all be-all of rock criticism, they have essential albums sorted for classic bands. For Led Zeppelin, the classic albums are 1, 2, 3, 4, and Physical Graffiti, with a notable omission of Houses of the Holy, which I kind of agree with. But I think it's cool that 3 is included with those, because I think it is every bit worthy of that discussion, and that's why we devoted as much time as we did to each track.
Interesting. And indeed, yeah, like, it's up there. It's definitely up there for me, especially after review now. It sort of just reaffirms, like, personal takeaways, and I love aligning with sort of what you experienced and went through as well, but it's also cool to hear some of the initial response was head scratching, but also, not doubting what would come. like kind of teeter-tottering. Like, I don't want to really shit on this album, but some of it was questionable. Probably the most questionable would be let's just put in perspective of what Lester Bangs was probably thinking after he sat through That's the Way and then finished off the last two tracks. I mean, what would you be left thinking if you had to go to the typewriter and take away at your column on the album?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. And I think that this album led specifically to the band saying, for Led Zeppelin IV, we are going to make an intentional masterpiece. There's not going to be a hats off to Roy Harper on Led Zeppelin IV. We aren't going to dick around. This is going to be very much side A will look like this, side B will look like this. To me, it was almost a reset where we liked what we did on Led Zeppelin III, but the general public didn't love how eccentric it was. So we're going to dial down that eccentricity and make it as mainstream and accessible as we can. And we'll get to Led Zeppelin IV next week. I don't want to spill the beans too much on that. But it is clear that we are both big fans of this album, which I think, Ben, leads us to our categories for today. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. The first category that we're going to do is Killer Line. This is a mix of lyric and delivery. I believe that last week, if I recall, I'm really curious. You start here. You start with the Killer Line of Led Zeppelin III. I want to hear yours.
Well, if you don't mind, I do distinctly remember last week that you kicked this off, so I kicked this off, so I kind of want to hear yours.
Oh, mine. Okay, fine, good. I'm glad you remembered.
Yeah.
All right, mine is kind of random. It's from Celebration Day. Okay. The price you pay to nowhere has increased $1 more. It's not a high note delivery from Robert, but there is such a confidence with which he delivers it. The price you pay to nowhere has increased $1 more. And then he says, yes, it has, just like that. So it's a guy in the studio that has found the true, this is who I am. And all these things, it's so cool to listen back to that and compare it to 1 and 2 and think this is someone that is growing in front of our very eyes. Like just the natural ability to know when to riff, when not to riff. And I just love the simplicity of that line. Maybe it's a little bit too clever, but it's always stood out to me. The price you pay to nowhere has increased $1 more. It's fun, swagger. Yep. It's Robert at his best.
I love that. Obviously, the ever-present hammer of the gods was just, the easy one. Probably made 1 million+ T-shirts and so forth from this album. But for me, my killer line, and it starts with the word is, but I kind of had the ... because the way it's delivered within the recording is trade a smile with someone who's blue now. It's very easy just.
It's very easy just to bant. It ends.
It starts before that with the greatest thing you can do now is trade a smile with someone who's blue now. And it's like, to me, I'm like, oh shit, man. Like, sometimes the monotony of life, you get into it and, you forget that sometimes the things that become hard are only hard because you're making them hard, and the easiest things to do are natural. And to me, it's impossible to not listen to that song Friends without just realizing, like, we come from a very genuine and easy place as children. And as you get older, you sort of lose sight of what's easy and you make shit complicated and hard on purpose for some fucking reason. So this sort of always takes me back to like the roots. And that moment specifically was like, fuck yeah, dude. Like,
I dig that. And I love that right before he's like, he does the, I'm telling you now. Like his voice is so good on that track, man. Great choice. All right. You lead off alternative album title.
Okay. So reflecting all the way back to the start of this episode, I got goosebumps because I was looking down at my notes for the episode, and there was literally a storm of brewing outside with some subtle rumbles of thunder and lightning. So I have 3.
I do too.
So I'd like you to go ahead and do what we did on episode 1, which is you rank my 3.
Okay.
First is Left Turn. I took this as a clear indicator of a side A that was going a direction, and then Zeppelin sort of took a hard left turn. And no one is to say left or right turn is a bad move. It's just a turn. So I was kind of looking at it critically as like, this wasn't a cohesive start to finish straight line as Zeppelin usually does, but this was a clear turn from where they were heading on side A. My second option was two sides, two times, meaning there's an A and B to this album, and I'm definitely going to listen to them twice before I go to bed. It wasn't as easy as just saying, I don't know what I had just experienced, but I'm going to go hang it up for the night. So that was more just the personal takeaway. Like, as soon as I got done with side A, I was definitely ready for side B. And then as soon as I finished side B, I was ready to repeat the process just so I could make sure that I sort of embraced it all.
Sure.
And third, but not least, I hope, Quiet Thunder. There's just rumblings throughout, man. Within Celebration Day, That's the Way, Gallows Pole, Since I've Been Loving You, Out on the Tiles. Then, I mean, we cannot forget about Immigrant Song. There are moments of this album that are just like, it's a storm. And so to me, Quiet Thunder was like, it seems more subtle. It's not as heavy as moments of one or two, but it's almost just as at the same time. So I kind of took that Rick Rubin quote seriously and was like, it's not necessarily a freight train, but it's got momentum from start to finish. So Quiet Thunder.
Quiet Thunder.
What are you ranking them? So
Okay.
Again, Left Turn, Two Sides, Two Times, and Quiet Thunder.
Can I offer a revision to one of them?
Sure, please.
For simplicity's sake, Two Sides, Two Times to just Two Sides.
Yeah.
The dual sides of Led Zeppelin fits to the acoustic electric thing, and side B is essentially the acoustic side, right? Despite Friends on side A. If I were to then boil it down to Left Turn, Two Sides, and Quiet Thunder, I think that Quiet Thunder hints to a intensity that is not dependent on volume. So I can listen to That's the Way, and there's an intensity is not the word I'd use for it, but there is a substance to it that is not Crosby, Stills, Nash. Not to shit on them, but I'm sorry. You know what's amazing, Ben? Crosby, Stills, and Nash wish they could have written That's the Way.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, are you kidding me? Like, they wrote some good stuff. I'm not crapping on them, but I'm just saying
a lot came from That's the Way in essence of what came next for them. After hearing you right now, I don't want to cut you off, but I just thought to myself something that I know you and I both love that might make more sense here for my second option of Two Sides, Two Times is, given the guitarist's name and what I'm trying to get at here would be Jimmy Two Times. And we can just go ahead and say Out on the Tiles. We're just going to, just like Jimmy Two Times from Goodfellas.
Go get the papers. All right, so I will go with Quiet Thunder. It would be my selection of those. I don't know if that's what you were thinking too.
Same. Yeah,
okay.
Quiet Thunder. When I finally got through it and I finished the album for the third time, I was like, what are you calling this? If the gun is to your head and you got to shine and they're not naming it Zeppelin III. I'm like, Quiet Thunder.
Okay. Then I have one that I'll start with because I have three as well. Light and Shade, which is of the same cloth. That is a term that I think Jimmy Page used, and just to describe Zeppelin's music, there's light and there's shade. I always like that terminology for it. So Light and Shade is one. Another one for me is Alchemy. Visualize the cover, okay? Alchemy is here's the Oxford Dictionary definition: the medieval forerunner of chemistry, based on the supposed transformation of matter. It was concerned particularly with attempts to convert base metals into or to find a universal elixir. It's a medieval practice, right? So Led Zeppelin III's cover, while not medieval necessarily, has an old-timey kind of farmer's almanac quality to it. Okay, psychedelic in our modern terminology, but the word alchemy, for some reason, has to do with this sort of unattainable chemistry. I don't know why that word sticks out with me for this album. And then the other option is Volvel, which is a wheel chart, which is essentially the album cover. So it's mimicking that. I think for thematic sake and for the fact that Jimmy Page loved this term, I'm going to go light and shade. So we'll have kind of mirroring titles here. Quiet Thunder, Light and Shade. I think that matches this album pretty well, which leads us to our next category, MVP. Can I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. Jimmy was my choice for the first two. I think it's a fair choice given all the load that was on his shoulders. Robert Plant, Times Infinity is the MVP of this album. He never sounded better. He never, ever, ever sounded better than this. There's a quality to his voice that no rock vocalist has ever matched on Led Zeppelin III. He is a songwriter now. The lyrics may not be perfect, but I don't know, man. I'm sorry. I think the lyrics are perfectly fine. And it's the fact that the delivery is so convincing that I think this is, out of all the Zeppelin albums, along with 4, his greatest moment. I got to give Robert flowers. This is when he became the 1B. He wasn't number 2 to Jimmy's number 1. He was the 1B now. It was a leap forward. I cannot get enough of Robert on this album. I think he's the star.
100% agree. As I went through this myself, I had initially written down JPJ. And just to give listeners kind of an idea of how I do my process is I'll kind of have this notebook with me, and I know, our awards portion. So like I'm constantly thinking about like what my takeaways are, and I don't overthink it. I'm just letting it come naturally. But knowing how John Paul Jones approached this album specifically a little bit more from an artistic standpoint, the orchestra stuff, man, and how they most importantly wanted to make sure that they all played it themselves. There was no outsourcing at this time. They weren't pulling in, an actual orchestra or, synth or anything from anyone else or borrowing songs or tunes or clips. It was all them, which to me was like, okay, this guy is underneath the scenes adding so much to this album where this album wouldn't be what it is without him. So it would have been my second time placing John Paul Jones as the MVP. However, it was midway through that I realized the person that I'm forgetting here that is adding the absolute most to this is Robert Plant. So we are aligned here, and I actually just showed you my notes, so I'm not I'm lying here. It says JPJ/Robert, and I made a note to myself too that aside from Tangerine and one other collaborative song, probably Hats Off, right, was all Robert.
Hats Off is a version of Shake 'Em On Down by Buka White, a blues guy, which is why Robert's doing that kind of like impersonation of it. It's labeled traditional and arranged by Charles Obscure on original pressings, which my dad had one of those. So,
him and Jimmy collaborated on the approach to that song, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, but to me, everything else from what that album is, what it means, and the reason that it has moved itself up the ranks from the critical acclaim is because of Robert at the end of the day. Like, sonically, they're all already there. I think the artistic, again, version of how John Paul Jones approached this album was incredible, and I almost gave it to him for that sole reason, where it's like, you have to give him love for that, and you almost know that it wasn't Jimmy sitting behind the organ or deciding to pull in those string instruments. That's probably what he added as he came into it and heard in his mind of how these songs would go, which is just incredible and a absolute amazing approach to what ended up being the final result. But long story short, Robert Plant's execution the fact that he was bringing the lyrical content to the table that was sort of missing from Led Zeppelin 1 and 2. It was forgivable. It was like, man, I mean, it's flawless, but it's flawless in its own right because most times it's just simple. This was not simple. This was the opposite of simple. So definitely with you there, man.
All right, so we agree on that. Now the question is on side A or side B. What do you got?
Yeah. So I'm so hesitant to say because of how we sort of approach the beginning of this podcast, but I have got, and this is hip shot, man. I was going through these and I was like, I've got to make a decision. I've got to make a decision.
And I've noticed, Ben, by the way, that this is kind of a precursor to our spicy. Like, in other words, I know your ranking system now, so this is going to give me a bit of a hint as to what your spiciest biscuit might be.
That's right. I went with side B. Side B took the cake despite my clear
love of side A,
disdain of track
sure.
9 and 10, but also my love for side A. I do love it as usual, you know. And all things side B can't come without a side A, and vice versa. But I look for just the impact and the takeaway for, you know, the track listings and what I ranked as, you know, the top portion of my track listing, and side B ended up taking the cake. So
fair. Okay, so I went side A. I don't know. Side A of Led Zeppelin III is tied with one other side of a Zeppelin album for my most listened to Zeppelin sides, and I think that it is a perfect summation of what Zeppelin was great at, which is they were the best rock band, hard rock band. Riffs, no one topped them. So you got 3 songs with great riffs on side A. Immigrant Song, Celebration Day, Out on the Tiles. You have an acoustic song that has a very Middle Eastern, worldly quality to it with Friends, and then you have a blues masterpiece, essentially, Since I've Been Loving You. So I love side B, don't get me wrong. Even with hats off to Roy Harper, I love side B. I just love side A a smidge more, but it wasn't an easy choice. I thought similar to how you did. So I think, Ben, so far we have alternated each week. We have not shared the same idea on sides. Now this leads us, I believe, to Dustiest Crumpet and Spiciest Biscuit. Now last week I recall that I went first for picks on this, right? You are going to go first here, but before we start, let's predict what each of our Spicy Biscuit and Dustiest Crumpet. And by the way, for those that might be tuning in for the first time, Spiciest Biscuit is what we deem to be the best or our favorite song, and Dustiest Crumpet is the worst or least favorite of the tracks. Ben, I'm going to predict right now that your Dustiest Crumpet is Hats Off to Roy Harper. Duh. Your Spiciest Biscuit, before you take the mic here, my prediction is that you will choose That's the Way as your Spiciest Biscuit. Take it away.
So I'll get to go through my track list now, and then
you'll predict mine.
So you're correct. Coming in at 10, I've got Hats Off to Roy Harper. At 9, Bron-Y-Aur Stomp. 8, Celebration Day.
Whoa.
Yeah. And man, like I said,
I know.
This is so absurdly tough to go from 1 to 8 because I'm not taking anything away from it, but I think description as we went track by track of what Celebration Day was for me was super fun, momentous, awesome, but like, God, there's tracks that just have got to come before it for me. Tangerine, 7. 6, Immigrant Song.
Okay. That's okay.
That would drop to what would be the second half of my rankings. 5 is Friends.
Cool.
Most visited, man, like without a doubt. And I would love if I could get the analytics from Spotify or Apple Music where it's like, yeah, dude, this is just most played from that album for sure. 4 is Gallows Pole.
Okay.
3, That's the Way.
Whoa. Okay. Now, before you go any further, that leaves 2. Since I've Been Loving You and Out on the Tiles. Now, my initial inclination was to say Out on the Tiles, and then we got into That's the Way discussion, so I'm interested to see what you say.
Yeah, so you're spot on it. Since I've Been Loving You 2 and Out on the Tiles 1,
Okay.
and I cannot escape the initial impact that Out on the Tiles had for me from you, which was, hey man, you've got to listen to this song. You also have to listen to the version that the Black Crowes did. Like, you're gonna love it. And I did, and I was like, okay, but I want like 5 more of those in a row. And more and more and more of it. So I would just continue to listen to it over and over again. And if our listeners are ever curious, like, just put that on, and that literally is the definition of a spicy biscuit. Like, that's it.
It is
probably close to where the saying was born. So I felt it would have been doing complete injustice to the whole system and the whole ranking system if that wasn't up there. And despite being obvious, it also is just clearly the spiciest biscuit of the album. But
would have been my prediction before we started this pod. Our conversation led me astray. So what do you think are my Dustiest, Crumpet, is my Dustiest Crumpet, and Spiciest Biscuit?
That's off to Roy Harper.
Okay.
Dust. I think your Spiciest Biscuit is going to be... I'm torn here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can call 1 and 2 for you, though. Like,
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and say that initially my gut would lead me to say, man, you're just going to be tried and true, and you're going to throw Immigrant Song as your 1. I'm going to go ahead and notch that down to number 2.
Okay.
I'm going to bump Gallows Pole up to number 1.
Okay. So my top 10, I mean, here's the thing. Yes, 10 is hats off to Roy Harper. No offense to it. It is what it is. I don't think the band would even be offended by that. I don't think they meant it to be the most serious of songs. Number 9 for me, Bron-Y-Aur Stomp, so we are in agreement there. Number 8, Tangerine, which I believe you had at number 7. Number 7, I have Friends, but keep in mind, I love Tangerine. I love Friends, so this is not sliding any of them. Number 6 is Celebration Day, which is a pretty good 6th best song in the album. Number 5... Yeah. This is how good this album is. That's the Way. Number 4, Out on the Tiles. Number 3, Since I've Been Loving You. Number 2, I Made a Switch at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I did. I knew that my history as a music fan, like the context of me being a rock music fan, all came from Immigrant Song. I love it to death. It is a 10 out of 10. It's number 2. To me, Gallows Pole is the spiciest biscuit of Led Zeppelin III. You nailed it. 1 and 2. Spot on. Would you have guessed Since I've Been Loving You as my number 3?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And Out on the Tiles, I couldn't put any lower than 4. I just love Out on the Tiles.
For sure. And I think the length of that song probably added to that for you. For me, it's just, again, sort of the closeted Led Zeppelin fan for a long time where I was like, I enjoy them, but I'm not, balls deep, as the kids say.
Yes, the kids.
Where I love Out on the Tiles. However, man, if I truly critically broke this down from now, like my personal accolades for like the whole catalog through and through, I'd have to agree with you. On your takeaway,
Was Gallows Pole your number 2? Remind me.
No, Gallows Pole is 4 for me. I just know how impactful that song has been for you, just from like a dark and cosmic region for a different speed of Zeppelin. And Since I've Been Loving You was pretty easy for me to pin as your top 3. And I would have to equate that to the live version from Celebration Day.
Great version.
I think you and I both, man, the first time you ever showed me that DVD, you went to that song. You're like, we'll start with this. And there's a million songs we can listen to, but just listen to this shit. And we did, which I kept thinking about as I was like reviewing this album. I'm like, God damn, like most times 9 out of 10, like for me, it's all about live takeaways, Dave Matthews Band. It's like, how often do we sit there and listen to the studio albums? Like never. It's live albums and live takeaways from songs that we love. And I sort of started to let that creep into my brain with this. I was like, Since I've Been Loving You is incredible. It's also incredible they can like replicate that sound live and do it over and over again. But Out on the Tiles for me, it was like standalone. This is an actual physical spicy biscuit.
It is a spicy biscuit, yes, by the definition.
I also love your rankings because, I mean, I think it's fair in the fact that, again, if I would have taken this as a whole catalog, Immigrant Song and Gallows Pole both affect me, on that level. Gallows Pole was in the top 5 for me. And the only reason Immigrant Song slipped to 6 is because I think, again, for like the third album in a row, it's there. Like it's not going anywhere. And I sort of gravitate towards the unsung heroes of these albums.
Yeah, that's fair.
Those songs are played so often that, like, I could tell you the first time I heard Immigrant Song, I know I enjoy playing it. I know I enjoy hearing it. But in terms of putting it way far up, I'm like, I have some just feelings about some other things. And honestly, it would have been top 5 had I not had that amazing experience with Don Elmore and Frankie and Kenton with Friends. But
Friends is great, man. I put it number 7, and I'm like, I really like that song. And Tangerine at 8, only because it's kind of a simple, not throwaway song. And I love Bron-Y-Aur. Well, I don't love. I really enjoy Bron-Y-Aur Stomp, and that's number 9. I think that speaks to the depth of this album that I think over the years, I said at the beginning of this episode, I'll say it again. I don't know if it's the best Zeppelin album. I know it's my favorite. I'm pretty sure it is. And it's the one I go back to the most. I know that for sure. So I think the rankings kind of reflect the fact that this is a very deep album with something to enjoy no matter what your taste or mood might be that day. So we have a big one next week. Now, we are, Ben, 3 hours and 7 minutes into this fucker. So do you want to do an expedited Billboard game so we can kind of get context as to where the music industry was at when this album came out?
Yeah. I do. Give me 1 second here if you don't mind. I had it pulled up. And
the fact you nailed Gallows Pole and Immigrant Song. You knew. I was trying to hide it during the discussion, and I was trying to maybe misdirect you a little bit with, because I love That's the Way, even though it ended up number 5. And I know, listen, dude, I know that That's the Way is probably a better song than Out on the Tiles, but I cannot get enough of Out on the Tiles. All my life, I keep going back to that riff. So I had to give it its flowers at number 4.
Yeah, no, I it's just fine. I think there was some tells in the way that you were really digging into Gallows Pole, which I dug into a couple songs on this album too. And
I thought Celebration Day for you would be like top 3.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know what it is, man. There's going to be some songs on albums coming up, though, where it's going to be like, again, dude, as you're experiencing these things closer and closer to remembering when you could just dig into the album yourself, I have not looked ahead on purpose. And I think you know how dedicated I've been to this. You've been like, hey, man, just throw this on. And I'm like, I don't even listen to like other bands' versions of songs that are on albums coming up because I don't want any preconceived now perspective on how I take those songs until I'm going to listen to the album through. But I know for a fact some Zeppelin songs coming up that are absolute heavy hitters just in my life in general. And I'm like, how am I going to possibly go against this in respect to Spiciest Biscuit? But I'm also thinking like, hey, I've gone through these tracks pretty relative in the same capacity of feeling in the moment of taking the album for what it is today. And I think you did too with this ranking that you just did. I mean, if I would have just been like off the cuff, what's Mike's favorite song from this album before we have done this podcast, I'd been like Immigrant Song without a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most meaningful.
Yeah. But after discussions and kind of looking at it from a different perspective, Gallows Pole makes perfect sense. So All
Okay,
right.
so Billboard charts. This is you're doing this the week that this came out, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Billboard Hot 100 for
Albums.
1 second here.
And just for context's sake, Led Zeppelin III was number 3 the week that it was released. It did not get number 1 until week number 2.
So this is and I guess we can just cut some of this out, hopefully, if it's not correct. But when I look up Billboard Top 100 for the week of October 10th, 1970, Zeppelin is not on the top 10.
Well, question, are these singles or albums? Because Hot 100, I think, is the singles chart.
Yeah, that Billboard Hot 100.
Billboard Top 200 albums is usually the chart for albums. Now, I'm trying to think then, as you're pulling that up, for the fall of 1970, the Beatles would have been done. Let It Be came out, I don't know when in 1970, but maybe that's up there. You're looking at Cream is dissolved. Maybe Sly and the Family Stone is making a run. The Rolling Stones did not have an album in 1970 because they went from Let It Bleed in 1969 to Sticky Fingers in 71. Maybe, no, they wouldn't have had that in 1970. So it was pretty open for Zeppelin to make a run in 1970.
And this sort of occurred to me last week, too, when we went through this, and I was like, yeah, Zeppelin wasn't anywhere on this
Well,
list.
I had made a mistake last week of saying that Led Zeppelin II debuted at number 1. I don't think it did. It got there, and it replaced Abbey Road, but not at first.
Here's the problem. Hold on.
Now, as you're pulling that up, I will say that as I look here at our awards, the fact that we switched side A and side B, that's interesting. We both had the same MVP, Robert Plant. Our alternative album titles were similar, kind of reflecting on the dynamicism of Led Zeppelin III. You had a killer line from Friends, and I had one from Celebration Day. We agreed on Dustiest Crumpet, and my Spiciest Biscuit was Gallows Pole, a late switch for me today, and yours was Out on the Tiles, which is, of all the Zeppelin riffs, one of my all-time favorites, and still a goddamn beast to try to play. Any luck with that chart?
Yeah, sorry, man. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Got it.
All right, so number 1 on the Billboard Top 200 album chart. This is the week of October 10th, 1970.
This is October 24th.
That's fine. We can do that. So this is 3 weeks after Zeppelin. So I'm guessing Led Zeppelin 3 is number 1.
It is not.
What the fuck?
New October 24th. So I'm wondering if this is like the UK.
Well, question, is Led Zeppelin 3 even on it?
It is, number 3.
Okay, so that makes sense because it did not have the staying power on the charts as Zeppelin 2 did. So let's go to number 1. Any hints as to what kind of genre we're looking at here?
Yeah, so, all right, let's kick this off now. So, Billboard Game, what we would look to do here is come up with clever ways to hint at who was in accompaniment of Led Zeppelin on the top 10, top 20, top 25, top 100 albums during the week that they kind of hit in. So this act has been mentioned before during the Billboard Games.
Okay.
This specific artist was present on a little game that Buddy and I played as kids, Tummy Sticks. No,
What the
KB
fuck?
Top 10 Countdown.
So wait. I got it. Santana Abraxas.
Yes.
Okay. So that had Black Magic Woman and Oye Como Va.
Just heavy hitters. Number 2, which was number 1.
Was it Abbey Road came back to number 1?
No, and these dudes were top 10, top 5 probably for like 14 weeks.
Credence?
Yep.
1970 Cosmos Factory?
Boom.
Okay.
Got it.
Number 3, Led Zeppelin III. So number 4.
I mean, I'd say one single city and you would knock
okay.
it out of the park. But
What genre?
Motown.
Marvin Gaye?
No.
Is it a solo artist or a group?
Group.
Temptations?
Nope.
Hmm.
More obvious. I gave it away.
Oh, shit. Male group?
Yes.
Four Tops, Temptations, Smokey Robinson, The Miracles. Just throw it to me. What am I missing?
Gary, Indiana.
Oh, they were Motown too. So the Jackson 5 were as early as 1970?
Third album. Yeah.
Whoa, okay. I did not know that.
Number 5, tried and true to my heart. One of my favorite solo artists probably of all time.
Cat Stevens?
Guilty pleasure. Damn close. I
Not
love Cat.
Not Shuggy Otis. He wasn't top 10.
You were extremely hot on Cat Stevens.
James Taylor? Fire and Rain? Was that the name of the album, or just James Old Blue Eyes, or what was it called?
Sweet Baby James.
Sweet Baby James, that's it.
I've got 2 copies of, and still it's up there.
Okay, so we're through the top 5, right? It's number 6.
Yep. You and I have seen 6 2 times together live. Should have been 3.
Okay, so Rolling Stones, it must be a compilation album?
Yeah. Get
Is
your
it-
yahs out.
Oh, live. Okay, so their live album, recorded in 1969, Get Your Yayas Out, came out in 70. Yes, okay, makes sense.
Number 7, a soundtrack. Just think about the year.
Okay, 1970. So would it have been Funky?
Late October. That's a stretch.
Okay. Hippie influenced?
Sure.
Was it like Fifth Dimension, Age of Aquarius kind of shit? Or Hairspray? Or not Hairspray, Hair?
You're on the right track, but like think more broad. Not specific to any one play per se, one artist per se.
A movie soundtrack.
Just a soundtrack. Didn't say movie.
Oh. TV show soundtrack?
No, getting colder.
A play?
No, colder.
Well, what is it?
Woodstock.
I see. So last week I said Woodstock soundtrack, but it makes sense. It took him a year to actually get it out. Okay.
8, solo album for this gentleman.
Okay.
Coming off of an illustrious career with his mates. Forementioned during our pod.
Stephen Stills.
Close.
Oh. Graham
Or
Nash? No, duh. Neil Young.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing about Young. He joined them later, so he already was established. Was this album, 1970 Neil Young, was it after the Gold Rush?
Got it.
Got
it. 9, personal favorite of ours, sort of on the nod of Woodstock. I guess that's the hint I'll give you.
Is it a solo artist performance from a festival?
No.
No. Okay. Was it another festival documentary thing?
No, solo artist with his album.
Richie Havens.
And band. Close.
Ravi Shankar.
Close on the bill.
Oh, solo artist or band?
Solo artist with a band. Just think more extravagant.
Sly and the Family Stone. No?
Less extravagant.
Okay. Joe Cocker.
Yes.
There we go. With a little help from my friends?
Mad Dog is an Englishman. Which,
classic album. Okay.
And then number 10 you should get. I mean, kind of your namesake.
The Carpenters Close to You? Was that the album Close to You? My mom has the entire Carpenters discography, and I don't know if it's ironic or coincidental that she was a huge Carpenters fan before ever meeting Papa Carpenter. So there you go.
She probably just was on a search for a Carpenter.
I mean, it would make sense. I will say the Carpenters did have some great pop songs, but that, Ben, was a lot of fun, and it was we keep these episodes getting longer. I think we'll be we're gonna leave it. I think we need to leave it because I think the conversational style is good. I like listening to long podcast, and we are ending this, Ben, at 3 hours, 20 minutes for Led Zeppelin III.
Insane.
But you know what? It's an album that deserves it. Now, at that rate, Led Zeppelin IV might be a 5-hour podcast, but I think we'll be able to. It's such an album that's synonymous with any rock fan that I think that we wanted to give flowers to Led Zeppelin III in a way that we don't have to for Led Zeppelin IV because it's been given that year after year after year. But we are now, as I said, at the end of Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 podcast, Ben, in the peak period of Led Zeppelin. This is where they really were flourishing at their absolute max. So it was nice to go over an album that's meant a lot to me. And I did not pick Gallows Pole out of some sort of, I don't want to pick Immigrant Song because it's too obvious. I love both of those songs equally. I'll say this. In my mind, there are 4 masterpieces on this album. Gallows Pole, Immigrant Song, Since I've Been Loving You, and That's the Way are, in my mind, objective masterpieces. But I slid down That's the Way because I just love the ear candy that is Out on the Tiles. So my list was a weird mishmash of best/favorite, and I think representative of kind of where I'm at with this. But overall, you would agree after this discussion that 3 is the best yet, would you?
Yeah, no, and I think I sort of led off with the fact that I was sort of hinting at that, but it's tough whenever you're, up against reviewing the tracks and then getting into the awards that we bestow in our eyes upon the album. I think at the initial listen, it's hard, man. We're going through this exercise, which we'll get to with other artists too. And nowadays you can go to Spotify, you can go to This Is, insert band name, and you get the best of the best, 30, 40, 50 tracks, whatever it may be, right? And it's just laid out for you. And you don't really have to pick and choose which albums are which. And I think going through it this way is just so gratifying in the fact that we can go track by track, by track, by track, the way it was intended, the way it was delivered to the masses, and have your own personal takeaways on it. So I've been enjoying it. And after the fact, I think that 3 is probably the most well-rounded and my favorite of the group so far. And it's tough. I pause there because 1 is just so simply great. It's like unfathomably great that they were able to do that right off the bat.
Yeah.
And put an album together with what they were going through and how new and fresh they were together. Just a compilation of great artists, like a strike of lightning, as we keep mentioning. But 3 is like the whole package. Robert has fully arrived, and he's like, now I'm here, man. It's not like I'm a vocalist for hire and I'm fearful for my job if I don't take Jimmy's direction. Likewise, Jimmy is like, go for it. And John Paul Jones is like, I'm also going for it. And Bonzo is like, I'm still here. So I think it's just
still pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's just a healthy dose of like the entire package, and you get that. You get some fun, you get some lighthearted play, and also, man, for the first time, kind of along the way, there's like some pretty clear discrepancy with being able to like critique them harder than they probably should be critiqued on this album, which is like the last 2 tracks. And I think that bodes well for the ranking of the album because it's like they could have taken the easy route and they still put these on there. So, like you said, the middle finger to the masses, and we know it's to come. But heavily enjoying it. These long length podcasts are a marathon for sure. But if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. And we kind of got to break things down one at a time. And it's just too much fun, man. I mean,
Yeah, it's not work. I mean,
It's-
shit, man. We're talking Led Zeppelin music, and then we'll do another artist after that. And you're right. I mean, listen, we are going through kind of a honeymoon phase where we're talking about things we love or things that are objectively really good. We will have podcasts, even with the Led Zeppelin series, with albums that are flawed and maybe even downright not that good.
I'll
That's
let
okay.
the listeners know. If we were to do Dave Matthews and we eventually got to the album Come Tomorrow, if we even decided to do
Jesus.
Come Tomorrow, and we got to the track Bicka Dicka 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 Dick, I guarantee you we're not going to sit there and try to come up with some reasons why the band did or did not add that and try to come up with a clever shtick for 30, 40, 50 seconds, 3 minutes. A second would be too long to spend on that song. So in the essence of what we're getting at, we're going to get to albums, we're going to get to artists where we will address the song and title. We might not even talk about it because who knows, right? We don't know what we're going to do. But we do want to give accolades to the structure and the fact that people release these things. So I think it's just hard with a band like Led Zeppelin because, we're starting, as I mentioned, with the cherry on top and sort of working our way throughout. So
Yeah, we are not exactly starting small with Led Zeppelin, but I think that the cool thing is, it is showing us that just being able to talk about music, and we'll find this out when we do albums that are not necessarily classics, dude, this is joyous, man. It's just, music is fun. Led Zeppelin 3, more than the first two, I think, is a fun album. Even though I guess you could argue 2 is a lot of fun. 1 is heavy. Led Zeppelin 4, that we're going to talk about next week, is the what I'll call intentional masterpiece, where they knew exactly what they wanted to do. They set out to do it, and they executed it pretty much to perfection. And I'll be anxious to go over those 8 tracks, but I'm glad that we were able to wrap a bow on what was initially misunderstood, Led Zeppelin 3, and has come to be known as one of their best, as it should be. So very, very fun podcast for an album that is very near and dear to my heart. So, Ben, anything left before we get out of here for the evening? I mean,
no, man, looking forward to it. Again, I'm now grasping a soft spot in my heart as we wrap these things up. Fondly knowing that tomorrow morning I get to wake up and throw a new album on, and patience, man. I mean, it's been a unbelievably exuberant example of what patience looks like, because for most it would be easy just to toss on 1, go to 2, go to 3, go to 4, and onwards, and let it all ride as you maneuver along, especially when you're mowing or something, and then like Spotify or Apple Music does, it just kind of like rolls on. I refuse to move on in the catalog if we're not yet there. So what these nights usually mean is like fairly late night to bed and an early morning with the family waking up, and then I get the opportunity to kind of take the final hour or so before digging into work to listen to the album that we're going to cover next. And man, it's been a wild ride so far, and I think we're just kind of scratching the surface on what's to come. Really anxious, honestly, and hungry for kind of like some alternative banter, which is like when we aren't in such agreement, and it's not so easy to give flowers constantly to an amazing act with amazing formulation and compilation of these albums. But for what it is right now, it's Led Zeppelin, and it has been fun nonetheless, and really, really fun to revisit these things, like I said, as intended, top to bottom.
yeah, we're slobbing on their knob a little bit, but that's just kind of par for the course for
but
a band like them.
For the general listener, man, like just ask yourself and be transparent. When was the last time you grabbed an album and went top to bottom without, any alternative, pause and look at your phone, getting distracted, or just fast forwarding or moving on to a different track? I mean, it's a cool exercise regardless of who you're listening to or how you slice it, and I encourage you to do so. It's what this podcast is all about. Drop the needleheads. It's all about dropping it, letting it ride, and as the artist intends. So,
On that note, let's get the fuck out of here. I think we did a pretty serviceable job for Led Zeppelin 3. And next week, the Big Kahuna. I'm not even going to call it Led Zeppelin 4 because that's not its title. It's Zoso, 3 circles, Trinity, feather in a circle, symbols, 4 symbols, Zoso, whatever you want to call it. It is one of the greatest selling rock albums of all time. We got a lot to bite into next week. But for now, for myself, Mike Carpenter, Schmiggy, for Ben Yates, Yahtzee. Yahtzee. This is Drop the Needleheads, where the records spin, the bourbon flows, and the takes are as deep. At least in this series, the pod remains the cast, as John Bonham's bass drum. Next week, the Big Kahuna, Led Zeppelin 4, Untitled, whatever. We'll see you then. It's Drop the Needleheads.
Drop